This is Audible.
The Scattered and the Dead, Book 0.5, written by Tim McBain and L.T. Vargus, narrated by Tim McBain.
Decker, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 21 days before. Hi. You don't know me, but I live down the hall. I see you, though, and sometimes I feel like I know you. I see you walk out of the building and get into your car. The wind picks up strands of your hair, and the whole world moves around you, and you're alive. I've never known how to say hi, though. I guess I still don't, but I'll take a crack at it. So yeah, hi. I'm Decker. What up? Sorry if this is weird. It's my first semi-creepy letter to a girl that I don't know, so I'm still figuring things out. Oh, and just to be clear, my name is John Decker, but everyone just calls me Decker, even my mom. Have you lost anyone? I'm sure you have. We all have. I don't know why I asked. I guess I just didn't know how else to bring it up, you know? My mom died early on. I sat with her in the hospital. Plastic shrouded her room and they made me wear a hazmat suit. Back then they thought shit like that might make a difference. I'm sure lots of other people didn't get this opportunity to be with their loved ones. The hospital workers couldn't be expected to hook up everybody with a suit and supervise them to some degree and all. But my business lawyer knows people. He had me make a donation to the hospital and that was that. Trying to remember, the images get all mixed up in my head like there's a missing piece that makes it impossible to put it back together properly. Some sense of the way things used to be that got ripped out. I know it should be there, but it's not. And I can't quite remember how things used to feel, I guess. The nurses told me she could go at any time, so I slept in her room for 6 nights. I didn't sleep so much as close my eyes and squirm around in a chair in my hazmat suit. But yeah. I didn't realize what they meant at the time, but I think the nurses tried to offer me something to help her if she wanted to do the whole assisted suicide thing. I was pretty out of it, though. But she was sitting up and talking, and she seemed like herself and everything. She kept telling me I didn't have to stay the night, that she'd still be there in the morning. So on the 7th night I went home, slept in my own bed. In the morning I went to Wendy's before I headed over to the hospital. I got this idea that I should get my mom a Frosty. They were her favorite. I knew I'd have to sneak it in since you can't take anything like that into the plague ward. And I knew it'd be soupy as hell from being tucked against my body inside of a damn hazmat suit. But I don't know. I thought she'd like it. Even through the suit, her room felt different. Her face seemed more gaunt, the skin pulled tight around her cheekbones, puckering into pits below them. New wrinkles shriveled around the edges of her mouth, dry, crusted. She didn't look at me at first. She just opened her mouth and kind of arched her tongue against the inside of her lips a few times like a lizard. "Hey, Mom," I said. She blinked a few times, eyelashes fluttering, and then she smiled. "Decker, good to see you." Her voice wavered a little, a rasp grating in her throat that hadn't been there the day before. She extended her hand and I held it for a moment, though I couldn't really feel her touch through the PVC, just the pressure of it. I could tell her arm had a tremor to it, though. I released her fingers and dropped my voice to a whisper. "Hang on, I brought you something." I closed the door, glancing down the hall and seeing no one. My heartbeat and my breathing seemed to grow louder as my hands fumbled to open the suit. I wasn't sure what the nurses would say if they caught me in the act. What could they really do? Still, I felt the adrenaline tingling in all the places where my skin touched the suit, like sweat and excitement manifested in those spots in some electric throb. The Frosty cup squished as I pulled it out of my hoodie pocket. Way too soft. I knew that meant it was melted as hell, but I hoped it was better than nothing. Thinking back, it's hard to even express how this felt at the time. I was excited to be giving her this. It felt important in some way that no longer really makes sense. A Frosty. A dairy and sugar concoction that formed some primal connection to how things used to be. How things used to feel. Some way of looking at life that felt a long time gone. I don't know. In that moment, it felt important, though. She drank it through a straw, stopping to smack her tongue against the roof of her mouth periodically. She thanked me over and over again, and she seemed to gain some strength as she drank, her eyes clearing and looking more alert, her sentences growing longer, the syntax more complex. "It's creamy," she said. "My tongue and throat have gotten so dry, I think from the medication they've got me on. I asked the nurses for something to help, but they just pour me glasses of water, which does nothing. But this," she wiggled the paper cup in her hand, "this feels wonderful." The cup rose to her face and her dried-out lips cinched around the straw again. I could see the silhouette of the chocolate drink climbing up the inside of the plastic tube. "Well, I'm glad you like it." She smiled as she drank, and white cracks spiderwebbed out from the corners of her mouth as it widened. Even as I looked upon these signs of physical deterioration, and even though I knew things had grown much worse in a short period of time, I couldn't actually picture her dying. I couldn't imagine a world where she didn't exist. When she finished, I took the cup and straw out to the trash can near where I suited up, disposing of the evidence, I suppose. Maybe it was because I was wearing the suit, but the hallway felt like a tunnel, like I was passing through some narrow tube between places. I focused on not looking into the few uncovered windows and the doors to my left and right, at all the people dying off in droves. The nurses told me that my mom was lucky and that she wasn't a bleeder. The disease affects people differently, I guess. The bleeders suffer the worst, though they don't suffer as long. I imagine it feels long enough to them. Anyway, I didn't want to see any of that, so I didn't look. I kept my eyes on the floor as much as possible. People in suits just like mine bustled by, too focused on the horrors transpiring all around to wonder who I was or to notice the stupid fast food cup in my hand. I got the urge to wad it up as best I could in my fist, but I thought that'd be more suspicious, more remarkable, so I opted against it. My fingers wrapped around the top of the cup so my hand looked sort of like a claw in one of those junk machines reaching into the pile of crappy stuffed animals to pull one out. I reached the garbage can, tossed the cup in, and turned back. None of the nurses at the station there noticed me or anything. When I got back to the room, I could tell things weren't right. My mom's eyes were rolled back in her head, her neck tilted so her chin angled up toward the ceiling. Her lips peeled back just enough to reveal the clenched teeth inside. She moaned through her teeth, a pitiful sound, the sharp inhalation of a gasp blended with the weak cry of a small child. A scared sound. A helpless sound. She leaned forward and vomited brown goo all over her chest and lap and blanket. The first wave was pretty much liquid, just viscous enough that you knew it was dairy-based, I guess. The second wave came out thicker, like chocolate snot. Strands stuck to her lips. Wads oozed down her chin. 2 thick ropes hung out of her nose, flapping against her mouth as her head lolled along with her heaves. Her eyes opened so wide and she blinked several times and she looked at me and she said, "Oh no." She sounded frightened and disappointed in a way that I could not have comprehended coming from my mother until I witnessed it. It's like I couldn't quite process how sick she was until just then, how fragile she was, how temporary. And I realized what a child I was, what a goddamn fool I must be to bring a chocolate shake to someone so sick. Like she was just about to die, and some bullshit fast food dessert drink could help her in some way or make her feel better. She closed her eyes and she vomited more, indecipherable chunks coming up now, all of it coated in chocolate snot. The pile of vomit on her lap seeped outward in slow motion, almost like watching butter melt in a frying pan. I got the nurses then. They didn't ask about where she got the chocolate drink. They didn't say much at all, I guess. They cleaned her up and she slept. She woke up a few times, but it was hard to tell how aware she was. She didn't speak again and her breath got noisier and noisier, the air scraping in and out of her. She died early the next morning. One last breath, one last rise and fall of her chest, and then she was still. I held her hand the whole time and told her how much I loved her, and that she was a good mom. I know she couldn't hear me, but I think about it all the time. I think I always will. The image of the brown mucus spurting out of her, the frosty pool on her lap and spreading. Sorry, that was weird to launch right into something so personal, wasn't it? Considering we don't really know each other, I mean. Let me introduce myself in a more superficial sense. I'm 25, and, not to brag or anything, but I've been especially good at one thing in my life. Saving money and using it to make more. It's like a game to me. I work out ways to save as much of my income as possible, only spending it to set up new streams of passive income. I started out working in a toll booth making just more than minimum wage. Now I don't work at all and earn in the low six figures a year from a bunch of websites on autopilot. One of them got pretty big and I sold it for $1.5 million. So that was good. Reinforced subliminal message. I am successful and willing to detail it in garish fashion. Also, that was 100% bragging. I suppose most paragraphs that begin with the clause, not to brag, are. Lately I've been thinking that when my lease runs out in a few months, I'll go buy a house. But what am I supposed to do? Get a mansion with a fountain or something? What am I supposed to want? I don't know. I like being here where I'm anonymous. Nobody who lives here knows about me. Nobody cares. And this place is familiar and I have the things I need. So yeah, that's it. That's all. Just saying hi. A few days have passed and I've yet to deliver this letter. I'm watching the world go to shit on TV, watching endless news footage detailing how thousands of people are bleeding to death out the ass all across the South, reading internet rumors about goddamn face-eating zombies in Florida, and I don't know how to connect to anyone. I don't know how to say hi to the girl 3 doors down across the hall. I think I used to know how to do these things, maybe, but I forgot or something. I don't know. I know this can't quite make sense. I know I can't sit here and write it down in a way that will feel real to you, feel human to you. Maybe a piece or two will pique your interest, capture your imagination in some way, but I can't transmit my moment to you. I can't take the things in my skull and upload them to your skull. Can't share my experiences with you or bear witness to what you've seen and felt and dreamed and lived. I'm trapped in my head, and you're trapped in yours. I never really tried to fix that. Never really tried to bridge the gap between myself and someone else. And now that I want to, the stupid world is ending. Figures. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 16 days before. Over the past 8 or 10 weeks, I've ordered endless supplies from Amazon and stockpiled them here. Food, drinks, toilet paper, giant tanks that I filled with tap water. All this crap is stacked floor to ceiling in my apartment. Mass quantities of stuff that will keep, like Tang for a vitamin C source and beef jerky for protein. A bunch of flashlights. Crank devices I can use to recharge my phone and tablet if the power goes out. I even had a small generator delivered to my storage unit, but I know it won't do me much good here in the building. Better to have access to one if I ever need it, though. Have you done anything like that? Prepped for what now looks like the inevitable? I don't know if other people have been doing this. I assume so. But I started as soon as the first plague rumors bubbled up out of Florida. The stuff on the internet, I mean, before it was on TV or anything. Anyway, the deliveries finally stopped 3 days ago. From Amazon, I mean. I thought it was just a delay, but I don't know. I think they're done. Something about that makes it seem more real. Okay, so something I failed to mention in this ongoing train wreck of a letter. Outside of those trips to the hospital, I've hardly left this building in the past 2 years. I might have a slight case of agoraphobia. All my groceries are delivered, and I have runners to take care of anything else I need out there. Remember that storage unit I mentioned with the generator? I've never even been there. I just have things delivered there. Piles and piles of them. I pay the guy that owns the place extra to keep an eye on my unit. Change the locks periodically in case any of my workers get any ideas. To be clear, I do leave my apartment. 6 days a week, I go downstairs to get the mail. I usually do it late at night or really early in the morning to avoid seeing anyone. Or maybe to avoid anyone seeing me? I'm not sure. Can I make this make sense in a letter to a stranger? Probably not, but here's my half-hearted attempt. I just feel overwhelmed when I'm out in the world, when I'm around people. Even basic stuff like going to the grocery store. My brain short circuits or something, and I forget how to walk and talk and behave and think. I get stuck thinking about myself and thinking about myself and so on for a seemingly infinite number of layers of self-consciousness. It's not that fun. I can't remember when it all started. Maybe after the websites took off, though I think in some ways it started before that, as long as I've been old enough to think, maybe. But the thing is, I'm not one of those misanthropes who wants to spend forever alone. I'm not one of the people that wants to sit above the world and look down on everyone with hatred in their eyes. I like people. Most of the time I like people a lot, more or less. I want to know them and everything. I want to connect with them. It just freaks me out too much, so I stay indoors. So I bring all this up because I saw you today. You were leaving your apartment just as I opened the door to go get the mail. I almost said hi. I wanted to say hi. Instead, I froze there in the doorway like some idiot animal playing dead. You seemed in a hurry. For a second, I think you looked at me out of the corner of your eye. I wonder how I look to you, to a relative stranger. Do I look mean? Do I look sad? Do you forget about me as soon as your eyes flick away? I'm glad you're okay, though. I hadn't seen you for a while. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 15 days before. When I went down to get the mail today, I saw an old man vomiting blood out on the sidewalk. He instinctively tried to catch it in his hands, which only made it spray around everywhere, shooting red between his fingers, drizzling it down onto his jacket. I don't think he saw me, which was for the best. Jogging up the steps in a way was a weird feeling. This person desperately needed help. As bad as any human can need help, I think. I could see the fear in his eyes, the quiver in his lip, the way his shoulders sagged and his chest heaved. He looked wounded, defeated. But I couldn't help him now. No one could. When I close my eyes, I see the chocolate spewing out of my mother, and I see the old man spraying blood all over the sidewalk. I see these things, watch them endlessly on the internet and on TV, and it doesn't feel real. Is it like that for you? It just can't be real. It can't. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 14 days before. I really need to deliver this letter before this stupid world ends. Have you been watching the riots on TV? Pretty scary. Today I watched bodies burn in a fire at a mini mall. People rushed into the burning wreckage to try to salvage supplies. Some of them couldn't get out in time. Blackened bodies spread out over the floor and melted into countertops. The news camera zooming in, the charred images on the screen shaking and quivering with the camera's movements. The flames still flickering everywhere. I flipped past more footage of sick people. I can't watch it anymore. All of that human misery. All of that death. Blood coming out of everywhere while journalists wearing surgical masks explain the stages and the symptoms over and over again. I changed the channel one last time to see a guy's skull bashed in by police outside of a hardware store. Their nightsticks caved in the top of his head, the shards of bone held together by flapping bits of curly hair that shook as he continued to get pummeled. His arms and legs twitching. I had no context for why they did this, if there was a reason. In my memory, the newscasters didn't say anything, like they've given up on trying to explain any of this to us. The worst parts, anyway. They just turn their cameras on now. I know I should be out of my mind, watching everyone die, watching the whole world burn to the ground. I should be inconsolable. It's somehow impossible, though, to avoid becoming a little numb to it all. I'm scared, for sure, but I should be more upset. I think it's too big to feel it all the way. Still, I can't believe they just show that kind of violence on network TV. But I guess what's the use in pretending now? All this time, it's like we kept trying to present this sanitized version of humanity to ourselves. This censored edition. This idealized image that looks a lot more decent and wholesome and clean than we really are. TV could talk about the bad things, but it couldn't show them. But we've always been all of those awful things. Stabbings and stranglings and bludgeonings with blunt objects. They're always around. Always waiting on the edge of things. I feel like I've always known that. Always been unable to see it any other way. When I was a kid, I saw this video of a guy shooting himself at a press conference on local access TV or something. I didn't watch it live or anything like that. It was a widely circulated, shocking video at the time. I guess he was a state representative in trouble for embezzling money. He might have been innocent even. I'm not sure. He was a fat, bald guy in a suit standing behind a podium. He rambled about his innocence a while, and then he pulled a .357 out of a manila envelope. Everyone in the room gasped. He stumbled back a few steps, poked the barrel of it into his mouth, pointed it straight up toward the top of his head, and squeezed the trigger. His body slumped back against the wall, sliding into a seated position, and a stream of blood spurted out of the wound. From the look in his eyes, you could see that he was gone right away. His body still. And then after a beat, blood gushed out of his nose and out of the wound, draining down in a spraying spiral exactly like water tumbling out of a bathtub faucet on full blast. So much so, in fact, that it was hard to believe it was real blood, though it surely was. It flowed for a long time. Too long. What seemed like gallons and gallons spilling out. In my memory, it feels like forever. I don't know why I'm rehashing it here in such detail. I guess I've been thinking about it a lot as I watch these new horrors on the news. Things like that are happening everywhere now, you know. I always wonder about that beat, that pause, that moment of total stillness before the faucet turned on and the blood rushed forth. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 13 days before. You're probably already aware of this, but the apartment building across the street burned down, and nobody ever came to put it out. No firemen, no police, no one. It burned all evening and most of the night. I stayed up to watch it. The heat had knocked out the streetlights over there, so I was eventually just looking at red embers glowing in the black of night, unable to discern anything beyond that. The red swelled and ebbed when the air moved, when the wind changed directions. It made it look like the coals were breathing. The roof collapsed in the night sometime, too, loud as hell. I couldn't see much, though, just glowing pieces shifting and falling and kicking up bursts of sparks everywhere. The weirdest thing about all of this, from my perspective at least, is that I sat 50 or 100 feet from the flames and the smoke and the crumbling walls and bricks and beams, but I was too busy watching the riots on TV and on my computer to notice them on my doorstep, at least for a while. By the time I got a look, the building was beyond the point of any hope for salvation. A bunch of the windows were blown out and bricks crumbled away where the heat cracked the facade. Something about watching chunk after chunk of bricks separate itself from the wall and fall away made me think of those dreams where your teeth get loose and fall out. In this case, the tumbling pieces shattered on the concrete below. It was shouting that eventually got my attention. Crowds swarmed on the sidewalks below, necks all craned to watch the fire, hands cupped over brows to shade their eyes. 2 lumberjack-looking guys in flannel shirts got in a fight, and the yells surrounding that finally got me looking away from the computer and TV screens long enough to notice the inferno out there. I cracked the window to listen to them all as I watched, the half-disturbed, half-aroused mob 2 floors down. It was hard to pick out individual voices for very long, but I heard someone say it was probably arson, because for the fire to burn hot enough to blow out the windows, it almost had to be. I have no way of verifying that hypothesis, though. I also heard it said that no one got hurt. I tried to verify that on the internet, but none of the local news websites have anything about it. They've been slow to update lately, I guess. Too much shit to keep up with. Looking at the building now, it looks like a damn skeleton. Gazing through the busted windows, you can see right through. See that there's no roof above, no floors and ceilings left on the top floors. I can't believe no one came to help. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 12 days before. The power keeps cutting out. For now, it's only gone down for a few minutes at a time, maybe 20 at the most. Sometimes it's only half there, like a brownout, I guess. The lights dim down to the shade of a rotten tooth, somehow brown and yellow at the same time, and the red numbers on my alarm clock pulse and throb in chaotic sequences. But so far, at least, it has always come back. I know a time will come when that won't be the case, that it will go down for a long, long time. Weeks, months, longer. I can't say. I try to brace myself for it, though, for no more TV or internet or refrigeration, but I don't think I can. Even when it's out now, I flip the light switches out of habit. I try to turn on the TV or think about how I should look something up on the internet before I remember that I can't. I suppose it's all the same across the hall, though. That's the weird thing, right? That all I can do in a letter is relay my experiences and my thoughts to you, transmit my moments to you. Some of these will be thoughts you've experienced, thoughts you've already had, or worse still, thoughts and experiences you can't relate to, ideas that mean nothing to you. And I, as the author of the letter, have little way of knowing what will get through and what won't. But no, let's not get bogged down in this self-consciousness now. It's a waste of time. How have you been, though? I've been well, drinking some Tang at the moment. It's not the best, to be honest. Not the best. I think maybe it used to be better than this, but they changed the formula so it's half artificial sweetener now instead of 100% sugar. Pretty gross. But I have a lot of it, so I power through a glass a day. We all have to make little sacrifices in these troubling times. You know, I really should deliver this letter before one or both of us perishes due to one of the myriad of apocalyptic factors unfolding in all directions around us. It'd be a damn shame for a letter this long to go undelivered and unread. Anyway, I guess my point in writing all of this is that I have a lot of Tang over here. So if you're ever in the mood for a fluorescent orange beverage, come on over and mix yourself up a big tall glass. It doesn't taste like much, but it has a nice gritty texture to it. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 11 days before. The old lady in 12H died alone in her apartment. I watched them carry her out, listened to the men talk as they rolled the blanket-draped stretcher by my door, down the steps, and loaded her into the back of a van owned by the city. I guess they've been hauling a lot of dead bodies straight to the crematorium now. No more funerals. No more wakes. There's no way for funeral homes to keep up. In a way, it's a surprise that anyone is keeping up on these things, that society still functions at all. But what else can we do? These men wore gas masks, so I couldn't make out a lot of what they said. That nosy guy, Mr. Cooley from 12C, came out and asked them what was going on, though. They told him that some of the other neighbors had complained about the smell, and I did get a whiff once when they opened the door. It smelled like the dead possums flattened on the side of the road near where I waited for the bus as a kid. The secretary came up from the office downstairs. She said they hadn't been able to get a hold of her family or anything. I wonder sometimes if I will die in here alone. I leave the TV on all the time now, even while I sleep. I don't know. I guess I feel like I'll miss something if I turn it off. Some final nail in the world's coffin. Have you seen the internet clips of the zombies in Florida? Did I already ask you this? YouTube blocks them and the government seizes any domain that posts them, but a few got around anyway. The camera shakes around like crazy in all that I've seen, but they look real to me. Deteriorating humans eating other deteriorating humans. Yeah. Like I need to explain what a fucking zombie is. That's all south and east of here, though, so I guess at least we have that. Sometimes I flip through the channels just to get a break from the plague and riot news. Like right now I'm watching a soap opera. My stories, I call them. Okay, I don't really call them that. They're garbage. Terrible acting, terrible scripts, terrible sets. The triad. Actually, the worst thing about soap operas, in my opinion, is the lighting. Horrible, horrible lighting. It compounds the unnatural feel of it all like tenfold. I am basically watching insane plastic surgery-faced people say really clunky lines to each other on a shitty soundstage under artificial lights. It almost feels like watching aliens pretend to be human. Sometimes when I watch these shows and people kiss, I see it more like two animals, like two monkeys kissing or something. Two strange creatures functioning on pheromones, playing out their instinctual behavior to propagate the species. I don't see them as individual humans, as distinct from any of the others. Just hairless apes pressing their face orifices against each other to express affection. It's hard to explain. Unpleasant, though. I can tell you that much. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 10 days before. The power went out in the middle of the night last night and stayed out. It was so quiet. The white noise of the air conditioner and computer fans cutting out in unison made the silence louder, if that makes sense. Their sudden absence accented the void, highlighted the emptiness. It made my skin crawl. I got up to look out the window, thinking maybe somewhere in the distance I would see lights, some sign of an area or neighborhood unaffected by the outage. I saw nothing but the abyss, blackness, the night stretching out forever. So I guess all the air conditioners and TVs and buzzing fluorescent light bulbs all around town died at the same moment. The silence was bigger than I had even realized at first. I couldn't sleep after that, so I sat up for a while in the dark. I had a flashlight on at first, but I didn't like the idea of my apartment window being one of the only things visible from the street, one beacon of light in all of the blackness. I kept thinking about this saying. I can't remember where I heard it. The nail that sticks up gets hammered down. Maybe the light that shines in the dark gets extinguished fastest or something. Either way, I sat in the dark, and after a while, the people crawled out into the blackness, and they made noises in the street. Anxious sounds, panicked sounds. Strange, throaty moans and howls. They sounded like animals. That's all I could think of. That's all I could picture. Beings wandering around in the street below, in the middle of transitioning between man and werewolf. That's really what it sounded like. I read somewhere once that grocery stores only have enough food on hand to feed their local customer bases for a week or two. Sort of mind-blowing, but it all gets restocked every week, so it makes sense. Weird that we've spent all these years only 7 or 14 days away from mass starvation. Of course, so many have died. Maybe we'd get 3 or 4 weeks out of it. Maybe a little more. The looting will probably get out of control real quick once we reach the real breaking point. Thankfully, I can avoid all of that with my stockpile on hand. At least for a while. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 9 days before. As soon as I got done eating a bunch of stuff out of the fridge and freezer so as to avoid letting it go to waste, the power came back on. What a surprise, eh? The last ice cream of the damn apocalypse, and I didn't get to savor it or even enjoy it. I ate it quickly, worrying the whole time about what else I should scarf down before it was too late. I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time after that and called myself a stupid shit a few times. All good now. At least I still have plenty of tang, right? Yay. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 8 days before. I saw a dump truck full of bodies go by today. I heard the diesel engine rumbling, the sound getting bigger as it moved my way. It piqued my curiosity, so I got to the window just in time to see it. It was flying, the engine roaring. The thing plowed by so fast it took me a second to realize what I'd seen. It just looked like a heap of knees and elbows in the back. It's hard to believe that all of this is really happening, that all these people are dead. Almost impossible to believe it. They're just rounding these bodies up, taking them God knows where. That's a weird thing to think about, you know. There will probably be no coffins when you and I die. They will burn us, or they will flop us into a heap of corpses in a mass grave, or maybe we will just rot out in the open, undiscovered. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 6 days before. They hauled a bunch more bodies out of the building today, piling the 7 body bags into the back of a heavy-duty Chevy Silverado with dual rear wheels. There remains something so crass about a pile of people like that, but after seeing the dump truck the other day, it struck me that these city guys completed the task with real care, lowering each body in gingerly. But I wonder how much longer they can keep at it. All of the services cut off one by one. Society falls to pieces little by little. Soon, no one will come pick these bodies up. Very soon, I'm afraid. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 5 days before. No more cable. More importantly, no more internet. Like a piece of my brain ripped out, a jagged, bleeding hole left in its place. And all the hole can do, as far as thinking, is bemoan all of the information it can no longer look up, all the questions it can no longer find answers to within seconds. The frustration never ends. The electricity still runs for now, but what for? No TV, no internet. Fuck. Is that weird? Is it odd that millions have died? Maybe hundreds of millions worldwide by now? I have no way of knowing. But I'm possibly more upset to lose the internet. Is it because that's small enough to grasp, while all the death is so massive it just doesn't feel real? It can't. The neighbors' deaths don't feel real. Even my mom's death doesn't feel real. Not all the way. The plague and the riots seem like a sad thing that is happening out there in the world. Tragic, but at least somewhat distant. At arm's length, maybe. Like a movie, you know? Like a dream I will wake up from any minute now. But it all keeps encroaching on my room, crawling through open windows or seeping through the crack under the door until it has me too. That's when it becomes real, maybe. Is that the only way? Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 4 days before. With the internet and TV gone, I watch the world through a different glass screen. I sit by the window all day and watch the people down below. The foot traffic seems higher than before, never-ending streams of humanity flowing along the sidewalk. The people all look like scavengers to me now, brows crushed to wrinkles in concentration, eyes shifting back and forth, scanning along the ground, looking for something shiny or something to eat or something to kill. I'm not sure which. Maybe all three. I guess there's nothing better to do for most of them now but walk around and look for trouble. Some wear surgical masks over their faces, but most don't bother. I don't think there was ever really a point to it. Anyway, I find ways to kill my time indoors. I drink a ton of water and piss and flush the toilet a lot. I fear those activities won't be available or plentiful for long, so I'm getting my fill in now. Things will not go well if and when the water stops. I think even if I can serve as much as possible and keep the bathtub full for a little extra, I only really have enough water on hand for 2 weeks, maybe 3 or 4 if I ration my toilet flushes down to like once a week or something. But I'm not going to think about it. Not yet. In the meantime, I read. I drink a lot of Tang. I sleep a lot. The sirens never sleep though, do they? They moan all day and all of the night. Sometimes close enough to see the lights twirling against the sides of the buildings. Sometimes farther off, just a whooping cry in the distance. Even those shrill sounds fade from my notice, become part of the background as I distract myself with the window and the Tang. So the sirens become another mournful detail to block out. I wonder when they will end, when their voices will fade out. They have to at some point, right? Of course they do. It will all end, and it will all be quiet, silent, still. We will all be quiet forever. Soon, maybe. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 3 days before. The power fades in and out again, never quite going all the way off or all the way on. It's enough to have some light at night, sometimes dim, but the air conditioner won't run. Hard to stomach this heat in the afternoons. harder still to sleep at night. After all this time watching the riots and the overcrowded hospital scenes on TV with the rapidly increasing global death counts scrolling across the bottom of the screen, it feels insane to have no updates, no news, no stream of disturbing images to give a definitive sense of how fucked we are. Somehow seeing nothing and knowing nothing are so much worse. I listen to the emergency radio, I guess. Mostly it's loops of predetermined playlists without DJs, maybe edited reruns or something. A couple of times I caught part of a news report, but I didn't get much out of it. Just a long list of countries that have declared states of emergency. One station is just a pre-recorded government message about going to the FEMA camps outside of town, and otherwise only leaving your home if absolutely necessary. It's 97 seconds long and it plays over and over again. In a way, the best thing about the radio is cranking it to recharge it. It's reassuring in that I know it will still function, and the manual labor gives me a sense of purpose. Have I already mentioned how much I miss the damn air conditioning? My apartment is like a sauna, and weird bodily smells drift in from outside, like a mild cheese mixed with the odor that wafts out of that crevice between the crotch and thigh. I should probably be thankful to have mostly avoided the smell of death itself so far, but it's hard to be grateful for a body cheese smell like this. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 2 days before. The air raid siren blared for 3 hours last night. I lay on my back, coated in sweat, listening to it warble, eyes staring into the blackness, waiting for some airstrike, some bombs to light up the night, some nuclear explosion to disintegrate all of us into bloody jellies. But nothing happened. The radio finds no signal now, no more easy listening on an endless repeat, no more government message, no broadcasts at all on any station, just static all the way across the dial. I spin it back and forth every few minutes anyway, just in case. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 1 day before. As of this morning, bodies rest on the street below. 3 of them, sprawled out on the concrete. 2 are together, a man and a woman wrapped in each other's arms, half slumped against the front of the burned-out apartment building, like a couple who just stopped for a moment to rest their legs and never got up. The other, a high school kid wearing a Penguins jersey, I think, lies face down on the curb, his head flopping down into the gutter with the shards of brick all around. That one is much bloodier than the other 2, its head and pelvis outlined in pools of red. Crazy that the 3 of them wound up there not far from each other over the course of one night. Maybe they were together. It doesn't seem like it somehow, but maybe. It makes me wonder what all goes on in the night, in the dark, in all of the places where my eyes can't go. The people walking by just step over the outstretched limbs like it's nothing, their body language showing no signs of disturbance, their necks twisting their faces the other direction. Maybe bodies like these litter streets all over town by now. Maybe they've become part of the scenery. I don't know, really. I can only see this one little slice of the world. Either way, I have this strong feeling that no one will come around to pick them up. It just feels that way when I look out there. The atmosphere has changed somehow over the last few days. There are less people walking around, almost no cars going by. The world is emptying out. I've avoided mentioning it, which doesn't make sense, of course, but I haven't seen you in a long time. Your car is still out in the parking lot, but it's probably nothing. I'm just paranoid. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the morning after. The air raid sirens blared again last night for a long time. It felt like hours, but I'm not sure. I think it was about 95 degrees and humid, so I wasn't going to sleep anyway. I read for a bit, and then I stared at the ceiling again and felt the sweat ooze out of the pores in my skin. No matter how long you spend in that kind of pitch-black darkness, you never get all the way used to it. I can't even imagine what it'd feel like to be outside in it all night instead of in my apartment. And then the brightest light flashed in the window. It was like a gigantic flashbulb went off in the sky, so brief that I almost thought I might have imagined it somehow, going half mad in the blackness. I waited for a long moment for more flashes, for the boom and the mushroom cloud. My breath caught in my throat, but nothing happened. Maybe a little sizzling sound, but it could have been the wind. I fidgeted a bit, shifting my shoulder blades beneath me, waiting for some explanation of the flash to come to me. It was too bright to be lightning, I thought, and the lack of thunder seemed to back up that line of thinking. I realized that the air raid siren had cut off a few minutes ago now. Did that mean the threat was over? And how might the flash fit into that picture? The silence seemed so huge. I heard no traffic, no echoing clatter of footsteps or strange animal sounds from the street below. Nothing. The world remained mute, leaving the air huffing in and out of my nostrils as the only sound, which made it seem like I was the only thing that was real now. I squirmed again, my elbow brushing a dry part of the bed that my sweat hadn't managed to moisten yet. It felt nice, cool and dry. Too bad there wasn't much of it. I closed my eyes and drifted for a time, somehow neither asleep nor awake, neither alive nor dead, or so it felt to me in the moment. I floated in the emptiness, in the darkness as hot and sticky as bad breath, in the black nothing that squatted upon my room, upon my city, upon my world. And then my mind arrived at a possible explanation for the flash and the air raid siren. I startled myself awake, and my arm shot out to the side, hands scrabbling over the objects on the nightstand until my fingers found my Kindle, grabbed it, pressed the power button, waited for the blinding light from the screen. It remained dark, so I pressed the power button again. Waited. Still nothing. I put the Kindle down and lay back, the back of my head sinking into the sweaty pillow. An electromagnetic pulse. That would kill my Kindle along with every other electronic device for thousands of miles. This wasn't enough evidence to be definitive, of course, but an ache crept into my stomach anyway. A raw, acidic sensation in my gut, because I didn't need more evidence. I knew it was true. This morning it sure seems to be the case. No more phone, no more Kindle, nothing. The traffic swarms outside my window, a line of cars making their way out of town, all older models I notice. The pulse probably killed the newer cars. I haven't thought a lot about who might have done this. It almost had to be a terrorist group of some kind, right? People from my building walk out onto the sidewalk and stand and smoke cigarettes and talk, their heads periodically swiveling to follow the traffic going by. The cars must block their view of the corpses on the other side. That'd probably ruin a smoke break real quick, huh? They mill around, fidgeting, smoke twirling around them. I look down upon the tops of their skulls, at heads of hair that somehow look like discolored broccoli tops from this distance. I try to listen in, to hear what the latest rumors might be, but the constant grind of the engines drowns everything out. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, one day after. The exodus continues. The people flow out of here on car, bike, or foot. The stream of humanity never ends. I don't know where they're going. Maybe the government camps from that radio message. Maybe not. Either way, I don't think they plan on coming back. I wonder if some of them think they can drive somewhere that still has power. I doubt it. From what I know, EMPs can cover thousands of miles, and if they bothered hitting Pittsburgh, they surely hit everywhere else. They haul their things with them, as much of it as they can carry. Arms tote cardboard boxes, bungee cords strap luggage to the rooftops of Buicks and Chryslers. I saw one guy balancing a milk crate full of random crap on the handlebar of his bike. Maybe I'm just getting used to all this, but it feels less tense than yesterday. The people move with a purpose, their body language conveying more hope than despair. Rigid postures that display confidence. Faces wearing mostly blank expressions that seem to give off the faintest pleasant hint. Your car still sits in the lot, unmoved since I last saw you, so I assume you're still here. On some level, I don't know if that's good or bad. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 2 days after. Guns everywhere. Many of the people walking by are armed now. handguns dangling at their sides, rifles resting on their shoulders. A couple even bobbed crossbows in front of themselves as they moseyed by my window. If I squinted, I could almost convince myself they were t-shirt cannons and they'd fire up something for me to wear any second now. T-shirt cannons aside, the feeling in the air has turned harsh now that the biggest groups have moved on. A rougher crowd stayed behind, or at least the scraggly-looking types with guns are the only ones left walking around. Everyone else probably hides much of the time, like me. It scares me to think that I will have to venture out there at some point. My supplies can't last forever, not even close. Sheesh, I hope you have food. I shouldn't write this down for a variety of reasons, but I'm too scared to check on you. Not scared of encountering someone in the hall or anything like that. Scared that it's already too late. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 4 days after. There are almost no pedestrians now, a handful or so per day. All men, all armed, all wearing scowls on their faces. Dead-eyed fuckers, every one. I can't remember the last time I saw a woman or child out there. I shudder when I look on them. My shoulders shimmy involuntarily, and I'm glad that a pane of glass separates them from me. Almost like they are just a special effect on TV. Half CGI, nothing to fear. But I know they're not. I need to get a gun. I've thought about checking on some of the other apartments. There must be a weapon tucked away in one of these rooms. It'd be smart to start looking now before I absolutely need it. I wonder sometimes. Who knows how many of these apartments around me are filled with the dead? There are too many cars left in the lot. Not everyone got out during that mass exodus. And still, I've seen no one go in or out of the building in the past couple of days. Heard no activity in the hall. I doubt anyone else was sitting on the food stash that I have. They'd need to get out there to find something to eat, you know? I don't like to dwell on this, though. Looking back, I wonder what the first night of air raid sirens was about. Were there EMPs in other cities that night? Bombs in other cities? All the radio stuff was shut down the next day, which seems too odd to be a coincidence, I think. So this probably happened elsewhere. Maybe everywhere. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 9 days after. The water pressure has decreased quite a bit over the past day. It runs still, but I don't know for how much longer that will be true. The toilet tank takes over 6 minutes to refill now compared to 15 seconds before all this started. I try not to think about it as I stir my glasses of Tang, but there's not much else to think about. Not much else to do but think about these things and watch those corpses play hide and go rigid on the sidewalk. Nothing moves outside. Wait, I take that back. I think, technically, the corpses slowly shrivel in the sunlight. They bloated for those first few days, flies swarming everywhere. By some miracle, the smell didn't get to my room too badly. I got a few terrible whiffs, but it never quite stuck. It never lingered. I expected much worse, and I suspect I was pretty lucky. Anyway, I think the smell has died down at this point. The flies have moved on. Now the exposed flesh puckers, wrinkling and darkening a bit. Sort of like 3 giant raisins sprawl out there. They seem less real now. Less like people who once breathed and talked and dreamed. More like roadkill, I guess. Hunks of meat drying out on the side of the road. No one cares. It astounds me all the ways I find to distract myself from all this death. How often it strays from my thoughts or simply doesn't feel real. I see it every day, everywhere I look. And still I find ways to put it out of my mind. Even those moments when the full force of it hits me remain fleeting. I get upset. Feel that acidic sting climb the back of my throat, but it can't last. I move on. I look forward. I think we are coded for that at least somewhat. We look forward, not back. It never really occurred to me that I should be getting sick like everyone else. I watched it out the window and I was glad it wasn't me, but I never feared it in an immediate way. I never shined a flashlight into my mouth to look for spots on my throat in the mirror or anything like that. I guess I'm lucky, though. Or maybe that depends on your point of view. Some might prefer the death penalty to a life sentence to be served out in an empty world. No parole. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 10 days after. What else is there to say? If you're still here, you're across the hall, though you may as well be miles from here, and I may as well be nowhere. I sit. I look out the window. I wait for the water to quit flowing through the pipes. That's all. No more words. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 13 days after. I stare out the window at nothing, at the corpses stretched out upon the sidewalk, I guess, at the brown blood crusted to the ground around them. I haven't seen a living being pass by for 3 days now. The last mammal was a dog cruising by, pausing briefly to smell the hockey jersey-wearing body with its face planted in the gutter. The beast looked big and black, though it kept its head down, making it hard to identify the breed. A Rottweiler, maybe. I heard a car pass by in the night. The first since the day after the EMP, I think. I got up, but it was already gone before I could even get a glimpse of the taillights. I saw the faintest red glow, not even strong enough to illuminate the silhouette of the burned-out apartment building. Just a shapeless red tint to the dark. Everything holds deathly still out there. Sometimes birds and insects flutter by, I guess. Sometimes the wind whips down the empty street and things shake about, but that's it. All my friends are dead. Probably everyone I've ever cared about is dead. I can't buy any notion that they're all safe in a government camp somewhere. I look out at the desolation, hear the wind almost whistle through the skeletal remains of the apartment building across the street, and I know that most everyone is gone. I know now that you are dead too, that you maybe have been dead for a long while now. And I know that I will never know you, or maybe anyone at all except for myself now. Not really. But I write anyway because I have nothing else. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 14 days after. I had a dream about the milkshake. The Frosty. The ropes of chocolate snot dangling against my mom's lips. There were no words. No nonsense dream dialogue to make it unreal. Just that image. The strange shapes rising up from her stomach and spewing from her mouth. All the pieces drenched in milkshake. The chocolate pool settling and spreading over the blanket draped over her legs. Who would make a world like this on purpose? But it's okay. It's fine. To get that picture out of my head, I can go to the window and look down at the way the bars of sunlight stretch over the corpses. What do I want? Peace? I find peace all over the place, really. Everyone is resting in it. Everyone but me, I think. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 15 days after. Sometimes I think you are still here, still alive. I know it's unlikely, but sometimes I believe it. Maybe that's just easier, to think that maybe things could still be okay when I know they're not. Maybe I just need something, anything to believe so my brain reaches out and latches onto this. Or maybe it's real. Maybe you're over there in your apartment right now, reading or eating some kind of canned food you had stored just in case. Soup, maybe. Tomato soup that you heated on a little hibachi grill that you set up by the window above the kitchen counter. And now you wish you had a grilled cheese to go with it. Yeah. Maybe that. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 16 days after. Leaving the apartment for the first time since the EMP felt so fucking crazy. I had to work up the guts to go out there, and my spine prickled the whole time I walked around. An itch so bad like the skin on my back had turned to scales, so bad that no amount of scratching could satisfy it. I started small. Just opening the door made me feel weird as hell, so I did that a few times, fighting back the urge to slam it closed right away, half expecting some psycho to pop out of one of the other doors with a shotgun, or a Florida-style zombie to pounce out of nowhere and attach its jaw to my face. Then I built up the courage to ease through the doorway and tiptoe the 3 doors down to the corner and back just to get a feel for it. Next, I walked down the hall the long way and back, willing myself to not sprint back. My heart blasted out around 600 beats per minute during those practice runs, those thudding beats that make it feel like your ribcage might implode somehow. Maybe my heart rate is a little slower at this point. Only 550 BPM or something. Even now that I've been all over the building, my calves quiver as I move down the empty halls, and my knees do that jello thing where they want to buckle every other step. The stillness in here is hard to stomach. Once I felt comfortable walking around in the open of the hallways, I climbed down the stairs to the office. It was locked, but the metal wedge doorstop went right through the glass window there with the slot where we drop our rent checks. The safety glass held the shattered pieces in place, but I used the doorstop to pound out a hole, and I threaded my arm through the opening to unlatch the deadbolt. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust to the gloom in this windowless chamber of desks and filing cabinets, but once they did, I dug around on the secretary's desk for less than a minute before finding the huge keyring. It was in the second drawer on the left, the same one I'd watched her retrieve it from back when she showed me my apartment. I'm not sure if the key to every apartment in the building is here. It almost doesn't seem like enough. Either way, it's a lot of them. I started on the basement floor, moving from apartment to apartment. The first 3 were stripped down into the pieces of furniture too big to move on short notice, along with mostly junk items deemed unworthy of making the journey. Some of it in piles on the floors and couches, some of it in boxes that didn't make the final cut. The rooms all looked messy in an almost windswept way. A little food got left behind too, so I guess that's nice to know, in case my jerky supply starts to wear down. The door on the 4th apartment stuck in the frame, like the wood was somehow swollen. I thought about knocking, like the stuck door was an omen that someone might actually be in this one. But instead, I put my shoulder into it and bullied my way in. The smell hit then and made my face pucker. I had no doubt about what caused the odor. Death. Death indeed. An old man curled up in a mess of blankets on his couch. Thick white whiskers ran along his jaw and crawled down onto his neck almost to his chest. And his mouth opened too far, lips sagging into the gaping hole in a way that didn't look right. The smell conveyed an almost chemical element somehow, like something that would be used to peel paint mixed with roadkill. I'm not a decomposition expert, but based on my observation of the bodies outside, I'd say he was just exiting the bloating stage and on his way into raisoning. I was suddenly glad my apartment was 2 floors up from the odor. I really had been very, very lucky in that regard. Hard to feel that great about it in that moment, though, I guess. I pulled the collar of my shirt up over my mouth and looked around for as long as I could stand. He didn't look like the type to have a gun or a sweet crossbow or anything. His things made him look more like a hoarder. Piles of newspapers and magazines in every corner, clutter piled on every table and counter. I locked him back into his tomb and walked back up the steps, done basement spelunking for a time. It'll be dark soon. I think I'll check more apartments tomorrow. I stopped outside of your door and gazed upon it for a long while, jingling the keys around in my hand. I considered knocking, but it was a very half-hearted consideration. I could never actually do it. I don't want to know. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 17 days after. Still no gun, but I found a machete. I always pictured myself finding a handgun so I could blow people's heads off should the need ever arise. Now I have to adjust that mental image to me chopping someone's head off instead. It'll take some doing, but I'll get there. I guess picturing it becomes easier when the heft of it rests in my hand, tugs at my arm. Something about the feel of it just makes me want to swing it, to go nuts on some jagoff's neck, or at least clear some thick tropical foliage. I've taken a look inside 42 units so far. It's a strange feeling to confirm more and more completely that I am the only person left here. About half of these apartments are vacant and largely cleaned out. The other half contain the dead. I wear a mask while I check the rooms. It doesn't block all of the smell, but I think it helps a bit. I almost can't believe how quickly being around dead bodies has become routine. Maybe all that time looking at the corpses on the sidewalk got me prepared for it. Or maybe my brain detaches from all the death to keep me safe, like blocking out a traumatic memory. Just today I came upon 11 dead bodies. A dead girl leaned back in a lazy boy, maybe 12 years old. An older woman face down on the linoleum in the kitchenette, mascara streaking down from her eyes onto her cheeks. A slacker-looking guy in his 30s in a fetal position on the carpet with a bag of open Cheetos next to him, his fingers and lips stained orange. At least I'm not in Florida, right? These dead just lie around. They don't hop up and stagger about in a biting mood. Generally speaking, the Atlantic Coast dead are go-getters. Me? I prefer the slothful dead you find as you move away from the coast, thanks. Just hook them up with a bag of Cheetos and they'll chill out on the floor. The machete wasn't the only useful item I found. I'm now sitting on a much bigger dry and canned food stash, which is awesome but won't do me much good when the water stops. My toiletries are very well stocked too. Oh yeah, that reminds me. One of the vacant places featured a huge dump in the middle of the living room carpet. All the furniture was stacked on one side of the room, with a single huge log stretched out in a straight line in the middle of the bare floor. I don't know about you, but I take that as a commentary on the tenants' feelings toward the management. Seriously. The world is ending. Everyone is goddamn dying, and they took the time to shit on the carpet before heading out of this place. It speaks volumes. I'd say a turd is worth 10,000 words. Maybe more. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 18 days after. In my dreams, I surf the internet, mouse in my hand, clicking and flicking through page after page on Amazon, reading customer reviews, purchasing everything I want or need. My cart fills with strange foods like dried mango slices and well-reviewed varieties of ramen from Asia that I've never heard of. And then I hit up the electronics department for a new phone and a bunch of video games that never existed in real life. This sense of relief comes over me, like it was silly of me to ever believe I'd lost this, that I should have known it would be back, that it would always find a way back. Most of the time, the entire image of the dream is the browser. I don't even see the laptop or have any sense of my physical setting or existence, aside from the feel of my finger clicking the mouse button. If only Amazon could help me now. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 19 days after. The water is down to the tiniest trickle now. If I leave a glass under the open faucet, it takes about 9 minutes to fill. I didn't time how long it takes the toilet tank to refill, but it's a long, long time. I know this is the beginning of the end of my time here, and I don't like it. Something about the water flow slowing down this much makes me paranoid to drink it too. Like now that it's creeping along, does that make it somehow susceptible to bacteria? I have no idea. It tastes the same to me. I guess there's certainly no one treating it at the plant, putting chlorine and whatever else in it. So some amount of bacteria buildup is happening for sure. Not like I have a choice, though. Die of thirst or drink up. I guess those are my options. Still, I've collected and filled a lot of additional water bottles and jugs. I even have a couple of huge Rubbermaid storage containers that I filled in the bathtub. I'd estimate that I have over 100 gallons in reserve. Maybe 200. Not much in the grand scheme, but enough to make it a little while once the pipes offer no more fluid. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 20 days after. The great apartment hunt is over. I am officially alone. I checked all but one, of course. So I'm alone unless you're alive in there, but I know you're not. Searching the apartments ultimately yielded me a decent haul. Such a strange variety of things packed away behind all of those closed doors. Not counting the massive dump on the carpet downstairs, I think the weirdest thing I saw was a bed stripped down to just Andrew Dice Clay sheets. A single full-body image of the Dice Man printed on these sheets. Old as hell, I assume. I didn't even know those existed, and someone a floor below me was sleeping on them, presumably by choice. The big find was one of those survival filter straws. Basically, I can stick this thing into any body of water, drink through it, and filter out 99.9% of all bacteria and parasites. According to the package, it filters up to 264 gallons, so that more than doubles my drinking water supply. Huge. Hopefully I never have to use it, of course. I now have tons of headache medicine, too. It has to be thousands of tablets. I almost want to get a headache just so I can obliterate it with Advil, Tylenol, or Nuprin, depending upon my mood. I gathered up all kinds of camping gear. I didn't look through all the boxes of camping stuff I came upon. I just took all of it. I figured tents, survival kits, hatchets, sleeping bags, and so on all have value now. I'll sort through it to figure out what I really need if and when I leave this place. I grabbed a bunch of blankets. It's hot as balls now, but there won't be any furnaces toiling away on my behalf this winter. Maybe I'll be somewhere where I can build a fire, or even in a more temperate climate if I'm lucky, but the blankets should be useful either way. I'm excited to try some of the food I found too. I grabbed many boxes of cereal, Honey Nut Cheerios, Frosted Flakes, Lucky Charms, and Apple Jacks, and a couple of containers of shelf-stable milk. Some canned tuna and fast food mayo packets I'm going to whip up in a bit for lunch. I don't have bread, but I do have club crackers. It should be an interesting experience after so long eating jerky. The machete wound up being the only decent weapon, unfortunately. I found some kind of ninja throwing stars in a desk drawer, but I didn't take them. Seemed pretty pointless to me. I did take an aluminum baseball bat as a backup to my blade. I also found enough dead bodies to put together a really impressive-looking mass grave. I don't think I will, but it's nice to have that option. I celebrated the end of the hunt by cracking open a bottle of Crown Royal I found. I mixed it with warm Coca-Cola out of a glass bottle. Not too bad. The booze went straight to my head, made me dizzy in a happy way. I quit after the second drink, though. Something too bleak about drinking alone in this apartment building that is more like a mausoleum now. In one apartment, I took one of those expensive bikes and a pair of shoes that were my size. They weren't still in the box, but still. They looked like they were never worn. Jackpot, dude. Today I realize that I will spend the rest of my life looking for shoes my size. They won't manufacture them anytime soon, I figure. Nor will the ones I'm wearing last forever. So if and when I happen upon them, it will be a big deal. I bet there are other such items that I'm still taking for granted even now. Things that haven't occurred to me yet. Things that I won't appreciate until they are dead and gone and can't come back. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 22 days after. Today is the day. I will leave this apartment building for the first time since the EMP, since society fell to tattered pieces in the dirt. I will push through the front door and walk out to the sidewalk, to the place where the bodies sprawl and shrivel on the concrete. My machete will dangle at the end of my arm, its blade freshly sharpened. The key to my storage unit will hang from a string at my neck. I know I won't get out that way until I find a car, but I want to have the key with me just in case. I'll be heading out at dusk, figuring it best to travel in the open when the light diminishes and the shadows get longer, at least for now. For today, I think I'll just have a look around, maybe walk down a few blocks and back. But looking ahead, I'll either need to find a water source or some kind of transportation that can take me to water. To a new home, most likely, where water is abundant. I guess imminent death was that push I needed to finally make the move from my crappy studio apartment to a house. Who knew? Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 22 days after. I can't sleep. Totally wired from walking around out there. There's something crazy about having a whole city to yourself. It's lonely on a level that becomes stimulating, mentally and physically. My mind races from thought to thought even now, and I got this tingling in my gut to the point of nausea while I was out there, a feeling that is only now beginning to fade. I'm sure other people are out there somewhere, tucked away in hiding places like my own. I mean, they must be. But walking around town, it feels like running into them would be about as likely as running into a bear in the woods. Not impossible, but not too likely either. My footsteps clattered on the sidewalk and echoed all around me. scuff and slap rhythm that repeated itself in the offbeats. More bodies sprawled here and there. I didn't want to look. I figured I'd seen enough of that. I just gave them as wide of a berth as I could and pressed on. There were other signs of destruction too, though. I walked past a liquor store with the windows smashed out and an empty diner that looked like it had been partially burned. I decided not to investigate anything too thoroughly for now, just a little walk. I imagine that once I work up to it, I'll be able to pick some good stuff from the wreckage pile. When it started to get dark, I turned back. It was full-on dark as I arrived, and I got this uncontrollable urge to lie down on the street, so I did that in front of my building. The cool of the asphalt reached through my shirt and pressed itself into my skin. I stayed there for a long time, the chill creeping deeper and deeper into my flesh. The building stretched up and away from me, appearing bigger than ever, becoming shapeless in the lack of light, and I looked past them into the stars. The night was especially clear, and there seemed more stars than ever. Maybe because all the street lights and fast food signs weren't competing with them anymore. Either way, a million little pinpricks of light shone in the sky, the same stars that hung up there all the while. Everyone I'd ever known and everyone they'd ever known and so on throughout all of human history had gazed upon these same stars. Something about that seemed strange. Everyone dies and the stars never even blink. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 23 days after. I walked through the city during full daylight for the first time. After so long looking down from my window, it felt weird to be on the ground looking up. The building stood so tall, made me feel so small and vulnerable, insignificant. I think the emptiness, the quiet, enhanced the effect. The ever-present smell of smoke didn't help the uneasy atmosphere either, especially since that was something new, and I couldn't figure out where the hell it was coming from. The sun wasn't quite up when I set out, though. I walked the streets in that gray stage just before the dawn makes its appearance, retracing my path from last night. Thick air filled my lungs, cooler and more humid than it had been the night before. It almost felt wet where it touched my skin. The quiet seemed different, too. More intense, more dead. I poked my head into the big broken window at the liquor store, finding its shelves picked clean entirely aside from a display of air fresheners shaped like pine trees and a bunch of tattered beer posters scattered around the floor. I suppose there were a lot of broken bottles around too, intermingled with the bits from the windows. I grabbed a handful of the air fresheners. With all these rotting bodies around, I thought maybe they could be useful, though I don't love the odor of them, to be honest. In fact, I wound up leaving them in the hall rather than bringing them in to stink up my apartment with fake pine smell. The diner matched the starkness of the liquor store with the added strangeness of everything around the front door being melted and blackened. The wood on one side of the checkout counter had burned out and collapsed, so the whole thing sloped on a ridiculous angle, with the cash register and credit card machine having slid down into the fire, the plastic weeping and rehardening into deformed versions of the originals, both covered in soot. I reached the end of the route I'd walked last night and decided to keep going. It felt so strange to be in the open, to feel the air move against my nose and cheeks. I could feel the silence quivering in the center of my chest. It felt like when loud music rattles your sternum, somehow the lack of sound achieving the same effect, though I suppose the cause was mental, not physical. Either way, it's an overwhelming sensation. A thing shaking the core of your body, making you feel flimsy and small. I came to the edge of a hill, a place where the view opened up to show where the road sloped down into the valley, where the rest of the city resided. It felt like I could see forever, rows of houses and chain restaurants and bigger office buildings downtown. I stopped and watched for a long time as the day grew brighter and brighter, as the sun came out and drained the gray out of everything, bringing it all back to full color little by little. Every breath felt cool in my throat, and my heart sped up, and my eyes shifted to take in every nook and cranny along the horizon. Nothing moved. Nothing. The cars stood still, and the bodies held still, and no smoke twirled at the chimneys, no lights shone in the windows. The walk home was lonesome as hell. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 27 days later. I find that when I'm home, I have a hard time sitting still. I pace and twitch and play with the storage unit key dangling at my neck. My mind won't rest. It wants to go back out and walk around. It wants to feel the open air against my flesh, feel the asphalt just faintly give beneath my feet. More than anything, it craves the images out there, new images, new material, new vantage points. It craves fresh rows of still cars and new rotting bodies splayed on the ground. It craves that glimpse of buildings rising up above me, ones that I've yet to pass by. I wonder if maybe we all crave new images and always have. Before all this, we could watch a movie to see something new, some picture we'd never seen before, and we'd line up around the block at the theater to do that together. Before movies, we could view art, paintings and sculptures that took pictures out of the artist's head and manifested them before us in precise color and shape and texture. Going tens of thousands of years back, we could draw and look upon cave paintings or those first crude sculptures of large-breasted women. So yeah, I think that desire for new images is some core piece of who we are, some primal human urge. But now I have little new to look upon. I see my city dead. That is the only new image available to me. Gore, decay, everything I've ever known crumbling away and the broken pieces drying out on the side of the road. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 28 days after. Please help me find someone. I don't know what to do, and I don't want to be alone forever. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 30 days after. I walked in the rain, the water pelting my forehead, trickling down the back of my neck. Black clouds blocked the pre-dusk sun, casting thick shade in its place. But the lightning flashed to break up the endless shadow, and the thunder cracked and rolled down the street toward me like a gigantic invisible bowling ball. I knew that I should be looking for something specific, a water source or a functioning car that I could use to get to my storage unit, or perhaps a gun to upgrade my weaponry. But I made no effort in these regards. I wandered. I looked at the city, soaking in the sights and sounds and smells. It was all I could think about, all I could do. I could feel how wide open my eyes were, could feel my feet shuffling beneath me, taking choppy steps that slid the soles of my shoes over the wet asphalt with a scuffing sound. I guess I was too distracted by the new terrain around me to pay attention to my walking. I watched the lightning flicker on the stone facade of the apartment building above me. 1 second, everything looked dark gray, swathed in the gloom. The next, the lightning flashed, and I saw the shade of the sandy brown stone, little flickering flashes and shadows dancing everywhere upon it. As I moved into downtown, the apartments thinned out, and the corporate office buildings rose up above everything, a bunch of phallic symbols reaching their shafts toward the sky. Most of the skyscrapers in downtown Pittsburgh look like they were built in the 80s to me. They have those shimmering mirror-like sides, like you could flip the whole thing sideways and snort coke off of it in a pinch. I'm not even certain what the building material is, the reflective facade, but it looks like something Donald Trump would have called tremendous. Even if they weren't my taste architecturally, there was something awe-inspiring about watching the lightning reflect off of these shiny towers. I craned my neck to look upon the rippling electric flashes as they shot down the giant mirror to my left. An intense burst of light and speed, and the thunder followed close behind, throttling me, and the hair follicles tingled all over my body, and I felt like a tiny thing at nature's whim entirely. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 33 days after. I finally saw a living being today. If you don't count bugs and birds, it was my first in I don't know how many days, but quite a few. Too many for my sanity, I think. It was wet again. The ground slicked with rain and every pothole turned into a mouthful of water. My feet kicked up strings of spatter with each step, flinging wet off of the toes of my shoes so a constant spray moved along in front of me. I follow my whims when I walk now, never choosing a destination, never possessing a particular goal, just wandering. I veered off of the street to walk down an alleyway running behind some big, older-looking houses. Fancy places, most of them. The whole neighborhood seemed to have an interesting dark palette in terms of paint color, too. Phthalo blue and sangria red and butterscotch yellow. I walked along a while, looking at the houses, thinking this might be the kind of place I'd like to live in if I could find a well or some other reliable source of groundwater. And then something dark flitted along the ground to my left. I stopped and squared my shoulders that way, waiting, watching. A covered pergola shaded one section of a backyard, with oversized ferns slapping around it when the breeze blew. The movement seemed to have come from that direction, so I walked toward it, taking slow, careful steps. The grass wet the bottom of my pant legs right away, the moist flaps of denim clinging to the backs of my ankles. I hate being wet, so I grabbed a handful of pant on each side and hoisted them as I moved toward the ferns, keeping them out of the grass and away from my skin. The leaves rustled and the dark thing skittered out into the open, traveling away from me. It was a cat. A kitten. Maybe 2 or 3 months old. Just a tiny brown and black thing. It bounded closer to the house where it turned to hop along the perimeter of the concrete foundation and then the fence, finding no escape. I read a bit of panic in its body language, but not the panic that a feral adult cat would display. It was scared, but I think it was too young to even know what real danger and real fear even were. I stood still and watched it trot along the fence and then circle back, snout poking at the openings between the chain links. I noticed that it never looked at me directly, and I didn't know what to make of that. I squatted then. I don't know why. I released my grip on my pant legs and crouched in the center of the cement slab with the pergola overhead. I rested my hands on my knees with my palms up. I guess looking back, it came without thought to pose myself in a non-threatening way. The cat's body language grew less frantic right away. He or she still paced along the fence, as confounded by it as ever, but no longer too frightened. The creature still wouldn't look at me, though. I watched it for a long while, and I realized at some point in there that I was smiling. But I couldn't help but smile as I looked upon this small thing, as I looked upon life. Eventually it curled up next to the house and slept, and I moved on. I think I'll take some cat food back tonight to see if I can find it still hanging around. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 33 days after. I went back to the pergola with a dish and a couple of cans of cat food I'd found in one of the vacant apartments. I walked up to the house at half speed, not wanting to spook the critter. I didn't see anything around, though. I doled out half a can of meat into the bowl near the spot where the kitten had fallen asleep earlier, and went back to the pergola to squat and watch for a bit from a distance. Wind kicked the ferns around again, and it felt cool enough to be refreshing against my torso. I ran my finger along the sharp edge of the storage unit key hanging on the string necklace about my neck. I didn't feel like I was in the city anymore. These yards seemed big for being so close to downtown, and the landscaping here just had an air of country living, I thought. Kids probably played here under this roof, drew chalk drawings on this cement slab under my feet, and bounced various kickballs and tennis balls and such as well. I closed my eyes and felt the wind on my eyelids and listened to the leaves hissing in the air and crashing against each other. It sounded different now that everything had dried out. The wet leaves earlier almost had a lisping sound to them, but everything had crisped up in the sunlight, the consonant sounds sharpening. When I opened my eyes, I saw the cat feasting from the dish. His little head bobbed as he went back and forth, from licking to chomping at the meat. I got this weird feeling in my gut like I was seeing something important then. Something precious and temporary and fragile and small. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 36 days after. I've been going to feed the cat every morning. I had to backtrack in my apartment hunt until I found the room with a nice big stockpile of Friskies that I had originally left behind. Salmon dinner in a can. Yum. A few cans of mixed grill, too, whatever that might be. I guess that's yum, too, in a different, mystery meat kind of way. The little brown animal enjoys both kinds of meat from what I can tell by his rapid feasting. I've thought about trying to get to the point where I can pet him, even considered the idea of taking him home as my pet, but it doesn't seem right. He will live like a king out here once he gets big enough to hunt. I'm sure the rodent population has exploded with all the pesky humans out of the way. I watch from afar, squatted down. Apart from the meat offerings, that subtle communication in my body language, the hunching down, which seems to calm him, is the only thing that passes between us. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 37 days after. Why do these words occur to me? This never-ending stream of thoughts, of sentences constructing themselves in my head. And why do I get the urge to write some of them down? To grasp after the feeling of sharing some of these thoughts even with no one here. To compose them in a never-ending letter to the dead girl rotting across the way. Where does that urge come from? What is it hoping to accomplish? Why do my organs keep going, the juices and enzymes and acids squishing around in my gut to turn food into energy that keep me around? Why do I bother, both consciously and subconsciously? Why do I keep going? What the fuck for? Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 40 days after. The water stopped today. The faucet groaned when I turned it on, and a little hiss of air came out, a sound almost like an S sound whistling between gapped front teeth. And then it was quiet and still. In a weird way, it is a relief. I mean, yeah, I could die of thirst within a couple of months or die looking around for water, but at least I know where I stand. Not knowing how long the water would flow was weighing on me. I've dreamed about it so many times. Cranking the faucet only to see a little rust come out or blood instead of water, blood spiraling the way it did out of that politician's mouth and nose in the video. Real life almost felt underwhelming by comparison. Just a little hiss. Now that the water's end is here, I do have a sense of wasted time, a regret that wells in my gut like battery acid. I walked around, my head dancing with all these visions about me, endlessly gazing upon the stark imagery of a world emptied and made my own, whether I wanted it or not. I still don't have a gun. I still don't have a car. I still don't have any sense of where I might go in search of drinking water. And this storage unit key just hangs at my neck unused, just as my generator collects dust behind a padlocked door. But now I will act because I have to. I think that's how these things usually work. We do what we have to in life, which doesn't kick in until it becomes an absolute necessity. We never get our shit together a minute before that. Not really. I still can't imagine my future, which makes sense, I guess. It's pretty open at the moment. It feels about as open as the top of the well I'm plummeting into. At least I would have water if that happened, actually. I'd go out face down in an all-you-can-drink buffet. I have to move on, though. I can see that far down the road. Unless I find some kind of well around here soon, which I doubt very much, I'll have to leave. I guess I knew I would, but it feels weird as hell to think that the number of nights I'll ever sleep in this bed have been whittled down so much. I've looked out this window however many thousand times, and soon I never will again. Part of me thinks I should burn the place to the ground when I go. Free cremations for all the people left here, you know. But it doesn't feel right somehow. I think I'll leave it in peace. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 42 days after. Images of cars and weapons pounded in my head as I walked today. My feet stayed on the asphalt to avoid the periodic dead bodies that seemed segregated to the concrete of the sidewalk. It occurred to me for the first time that someone must have moved them, to keep the streets free of blockages. What was it that people used to say? Roads are the lifeblood of our economy? Something like that anyway. I guess that's still true even with the plague and the EMP. The roads must remain clear, even in the damn post-apocalypse. It's strange to look down the streets as far as you can see. Nothing moving all the way to the horizon. Some kind of exhilaration came over me as I walked among the human roadkill, the abandoned cars, presumably the ones with fried microchips shoved up onto the curb at haphazard angles to clear a path for traffic. The wind blew, a breeze just cool enough to cut through my t-shirt and chill my chest. A tingle roiled in my torso, all those tiny follicles on my abdomen and arms making themselves felt. Maybe it was being out in the full-on afternoon sunlight for the first time in a while, but I don't think so. There is something almost perverse about walking around in an empty world, a single figure striding past rows of vacant skyscrapers and restaurants and an endless row of cars gone forever quiet. Incredibly stimulating. It's almost overwhelming. It all seems bigger, too. Infinite. Like the concrete and asphalt stretch out forever without another soul to happen upon. I came to a gas station with the windows and doors all bashed out, the glass shards sprinkled all over the ground between the pumps and the building. I figured it would be cleared out like most of the rest of the places I'd passed, but I decided to get close enough to peek through the windows. The soles of my shoes ground glass bits into the asphalt, and little squeaks and screeches emitted from this friction. It sounded like a bunch of tiny versions of nails on a chalkboard. But the sound changed, took on a low-frequency rumble, almost like the engine of a semi-truck, but small, or distant. I stopped walking. The nails froze on the chalkboard right away, but the engine kept growling. Definitely a diesel engine. I listened to it for a moment, noting the way the volume increased as it got closer. A particular kind of fear came over me, a new fear, I think. A strange mix of terror and excitement and confusion that made my heart thunder in my chest, the blood roaring through my veins. I hadn't seen a live human being in weeks, and the prospect was scary as hell and exciting all at once. So I did the only thing that made any sense. I scuttled away to hide like a frightened cat. I hustled to the gas station door, tugged on it and found it still locked. So I hunched down to pass under the bar handle, moving through the place where the glass should be. Staying crouched, I waddled behind the counter and waited for the engine noise to die away. I peeked around the corner and listened. The wind blew then, a noisy gust that made it harder to tell if the diesel rumble was getting closer or farther away. I tried to swallow, but my throat seemed to have seized up on me, the muscles all tensed and weird. Rejected by the epiglottis, the spit kind of shot back up into my mouth, and I coughed a few times. The engine sound only got louder and louder until I expected to see some kind of large vehicle go flying by the gas station any second, sort of not believing it could keep getting louder without arriving. It made the hair on the back of my neck stand up straight and tall. It almost sounded like two engines, but I couldn't decide if that was just my imagination. I stroked at my cheek, my fingers momentarily surprised to find the Brillo pad feeling of my beard there. I was used to seeing it in the mirror, I guess, but not used to touching it just yet. The sound seemed to be on top of me now, grinding its churn deeper and deeper into my eardrums. Was the sound of a motor this foreign after a couple of days that I forgot what it was like? And then I saw them. A black pickup truck, a Dodge Ram to be precise, and a semi hauling a huge tank. They pulled into the gas station parking lot, the semi easing up near the pumps, the pickup parking closer to the door. I ducked back behind the counter as they closed in on me, listening to one engine cut out and then the other. The silence, the violent absence of noise felt like a hole in the air where the sound of the engines had been ripped out. People. People right outside. Probably armed. My throat jerked like I was about to vomit, and then I heard the truck doors open and slam closed. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 42 days after. Voices in the parking lot. 3 men. 2 baritone and 1 a little higher. Saying things. I heard them well enough. They even seemed loud in the stillness. My brain wouldn't decipher their words, though. Couldn't process language somehow. It was just a series of meaningless noises to me. Consonant sounds and vowel sounds all smashed together into flowing strings of nonsense. The voices stopped, and after a beat, a sound rang out like metal scraping against concrete. I remembered to breathe then, concentrating on inhaling and exhaling without sound, while the grating and scratching continued for a moment outside and then stopped. There was another sound, a smaller one, like something cloth dragging over the asphalt, but it was just for a moment, and then all was quiet for a time. I closed my eyes, the top half of my back leaned up against the inside of the counter under the spot where the cash register used to be. The countertop shaded me some, tucked me back into the shadows a little when I leaned all the way back. I could sense the change in light through my eyelids. It wasn't much of a comfort, though. Wind fluttered into my chest and heaved out. I focused on keeping my breathing slow and even and quiet. I was scared, of course, that they would come into the gas station searching for supplies and frightened men to kill and whatnot. I don't think I even consciously thought about that, though. I didn't dread that possibility or even think about much in particular. I was scared beyond reason, fearful enough to revert to some thoughtless animal state. This moment may as well have been forever. I didn't look ahead at all. A new sound faded in then. A droning tone, continuous, somehow familiar though not entirely. It was curious. I squinted harder, trying to place it. Liquid? Flowing liquid? But not the babbling of an open stream. Liquid flowing through a pipe, maybe. I leaned forward, peeking around the corner and peeling open my eyes. Upon realizing what I was doing, I snapped back to my former position, back thumping against the counter. Christ, what a stupid shit I was sometimes. I held my breath, but nothing about the sounds changed. I thought back on the flash that I'd seen. A man with the sides of his head shaved knelt on the ground. An assault rifle rested on the curb leading up to the pumps next to him, and a metal lid about the size of a flattened volleyball stood open before him, revealing a hole in the rectangle of cement next to the pumps. A thick canvas-looking hose ran from that hole in the ground up to the tanker. So they were stealing the gas, or taking it anyway. I don't know if it belongs to anyone at this point, but they weren't sharing. From what I saw, I'm not sure how they were pumping the gasoline out of the underground tank. I know there are hand-crank pumps you can use in emergencies. In fact, I tried to order one off of Amazon before all of this started, but I didn't get on it fast enough, and they were sold out. Anyway, it didn't look like they were doing that, but I didn't get the best look. Maybe the truck had a pump of some kind. Seems like that would have made noise, but I don't know. I waited, hugging my arms against me, crossing them over my chest and squeezing as though that could compact me in some way, help me take up less space. Each hand gripped the deltoid on the opposite arm, fingers digging into the quivering balls of muscle, and then I realized that something sharp pressed against my belly. I looked down. The machete. I'd forgotten about it and now had it pressed diagonally across my torso, wedging the handle into my shoulder like a fucking moron. I adjusted, kept the blade at the ready across my lap. I tried to stop myself from thinking it, but it was too late. I think maybe I brought a machete to a machine gun fight. I listened, but the sound stayed the same out there, just the faint gurgle of gasoline moving through the hose, and the wind blowing every so often. Drops of sweat held on as long as they could before gliding down the back of my neck and soaking into the collar of my shirt. That sweat that seems to seep out with an electrical tingle to it, like I could feel the adrenaline, the fear itself pooling on the surface of my skin. Footsteps ground the glass bits into the asphalt, 1,000 tiny fingernails screeching against 1,000 tiny blackboards again, all of them moving my way. Everything seemed to go into slow motion. I pictured the booted feet advancing over the blacktop, rising and falling and grinding glass into the ground, moving closer and closer to the front door. I leaned back further, pressing my back flat against the inside of the counter, my sopping, sweaty t-shirt like a lukewarm sponge against my skin. Heat filled my head then in some strange way that made my eyelids flutter, made my vision go swimmy. Not good. I remembered to not hyperventilate, to take deeper breaths and slow them down the best I could. It seemed to help. Once I was sure the footsteps couldn't get any closer, the sound of the grinding glass stopped and no sound took their place. I listened, waiting to hear the clatter of his feet on the tile floor. I tilted my head as though it would help me strain my ears. No sound. Was he inside or not? See anything? A voice called from outside. A grunt erupted almost on top of me from where the man stood on the other side of the counter. I jumped, shoulder blades sliding against the counter without a sound. I like to think my sweat lubricated things in such a way as to keep the movement silent. Nah, nothing here, he said. This place is wrecked. After another beat of quiet, the footsteps trailed away over the glass. The sound from the hose once again droned on unaccompanied. My eyelids fluttered again, this time not from faintness but some endorphin release that made my scalp tingle and filled my chest with some chemical bliss that was new to me. It felt incredibly pleasant just to breathe. I knew I wasn't out of this, not yet, but my body saw fit to reward my survival of that encounter. Time sped up again, maybe because of that head rush. I felt so good that I wanted to get one more look at them, to see their faces, to see what I might be able to learn about them. I leaned forward on hands and knees, moving out of the darkest shade under the counter. "Gotcha," a voice said behind me, and I could hear the smile in it, and something hard and blunt bashed the back of my head. Black rushed in to catch me, and I was out before I hit the floor. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 42 days before. Consciousness faded in and out for a few seconds at a time. Some panic part of me kept waking me up, trying to muster either some fight or some flight, but it couldn't stave off the blackness all the way. I felt myself being dragged across the floor on my back. Hands clenched my ankles, pulling me. My lower back, shoulder blades, and then head bumped over the metal threshold, and then the glass bits ground into the flesh on the backs of my arms, and the sunlight was everywhere, and the heat of the asphalt touched me all over. My eyelids flittered, revealing bursts of light. The whole sky seemed clear and bright and calm above me. I couldn't see the face of the person who had a hold of me, just a silhouette hovering up there, the sun at his back leaving only a shadow visible from my vantage point. The sounds faded in and out as well, voices rising and falling, every sentence stuttering and cut off. The glass scratched the blackboard at a lower pitch now, and that turned on and off too, like someone kept pressing the mute button in my head. And then I realized that I was still, that I had been lying still in the parking lot for a while now, and I peeled my cheek up off of the asphalt from where my head had lolled to the side, but I couldn't keep it up. It kept falling back to the ground, and I heard them laughing, all three of them, laughing it up, and then I was out again. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 42 days after. When I woke again, I knew a long time had passed. I didn't move. I listened. The men finished up their work, and I heard that sound again of the metal connecting pieces on each end of the hose dragging along the ground. The trucks fired up shortly after that, one then the other, so much louder now that I was close, and I heard their voices again, but the grate of the diesel swallowed too much of the sounds to be able to make out the words. The truck doors slammed, and the pitch of the motors shifted when they put the vehicles in gear. The truck slid away, picking up speed as they moved on. I listened for a while as the noise did the long, slow fade out like in an old song. Even after the sound was gone entirely, I stayed put. Apart from muscle tremors, I didn't move for what felt like a long time. I lay there and sweat and listened and sweat some more. I wondered why they left me. For some reason, I didn't think it was out of kindness. Did they think I was dead? Did they not see me as someone who could ever become a threat to them? By the time I picked myself up and dusted all the bits of glass out of the craters they'd formed in my skin, the daylight had begun to fade. My shoes were gone, pulled off of my feet. I felt at my neck. No string hung there anymore, removed along with the key to the storage unit that had dangled at the end of it. I brought the heels of my hands to my eyes. No more hopes of finding my generator or the multitude of other things I'd stashed there. I was shocked to find the machete still on the gas station floor. Maybe they'd overlooked it, or maybe they didn't give a shit about a blade when they had guns. I walked home under the gray cover of dusk, the ground cutting the hell out of my feet. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 43 days after. 18 hours later and I feel awful. My head pounds and pounds and never lets up. I've tried every kind of headache medicine and none have helped so far. I just sleep and get up to piss and drink some Tang. I should fix something to eat, I guess, or force down a piece of jerky. Maybe it'd help, but I don't have the energy for it. In my dreams, I am powerless, paralyzed. I lie motionless while dark figures flit about the edges of my field of vision. Shadows hover over me. Voices speak words I can't understand. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 46 days after. 72 hours later and I can't sleep. I keep thinking about the men in the trucks, replaying every tiny detail over and over in my head. The sound of the glass against the blacktop, the way the sides of the kneeling man's head were shaved, my pulse hammering in my ears, the gurgle of the gasoline in the hose, and then the thump on the back of the head, and the sunlight and the sky and the sounds of their laughs flickering in and out. For what seemed like a long time before that, I felt like the world belonged to me, like an empty kingdom for me to rule. But a new predator came along and made me feel small, powerless, pathetic. In some ways it reminded me of how I felt all the time before, frightened to be around people, awkward and anxious and apart. I don't want to feel that way anymore. But I've seen how things can change, how they must change, how all things must come to ash, how the old ways can die out and become something new. And I know I can change, I can transform, and so I will. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 47 days after. I heard engines again this morning. I crouched under the pergola and the sound rose in the distance. I could have believed I was imagining it, but that pitch shift when the gears changed tipped it off. It was far enough out to make it hard to tell if it was that pair of diesel engines again, or something else. It shook me up a little bit, the hair standing straight up on my arms, but the cat didn't even look up from his meat, which somehow lowered my alarm. Actually, I should say cats. My brown tabby friend brought along a dinner partner. A small gray cat about his same size, so I put meat out for both of them. The gray kitten seems less timid about humans. I mean, he keeps his distance, but he looks at me and everything. Makes eye contact. Seems curious. The brown cat is off in his own world, I think. Feels a little weird to refer to them by their color here, but I don't want to name them for whatever reason. It just feels like it's not my place. The world is theirs as much as it's mine now. Behold the loneliness. The only thing that's left. The only thing that was ever real if you stripped away the novelties and distractions, maybe. My window still frames the same picture as always. The dead bodies looking as skeletal as ever, with the almost leathery bits of remaining flesh stretched over the bones that look more and more like the beef jerky I eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's a rerun, though. I've seen it all before. The earlier seasons were good, but the window show is boring now. I don't get it anyway. What's the lesson of this supposed to be? What's the moral of the story that I'm supposed to take away? I pace the floor, and a fever comes upon me, and my thoughts shoot down new arteries and capillaries, pumping hot and red all through me, and somehow spreading wider and wider, their scale ever expanding, and strange melodies come to me from nowhere, flowing songs that compose themselves in my head while I walk, changing keys and modes on whims, changing arrangements and instrumentation and genre seamlessly. My heart bangs out a backbeat, and I feel my pulse throb in my neck. My skin tingles with that half-anxious, half-excited feeling all along my torso. It's almost a medicinal sensation, like what I always imagined dandruff shampoo would feel like on my scalp, except all along my chest and back and belly instead. I try to envision a future, my future, but it's difficult in the dark, maybe impossible. I don't know where I'll go or who else might be there. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to want? Who am I supposed to be? Can any of these things make sense anymore? Will those of us still here spend the rest of our time fighting to get back what we had? What did we even have? Convenience? Novelty? Is that the best we can achieve? Is it even worth fighting for? Everyone dies. Is that the lesson? That was always the case though, wasn't it? Now a bunch of them just died all at once, all together. So what's the difference? In some ways everything is different. In some ways nothing is different. For me, that is. Part of me tells myself how I would do it all over, how I would handle things differently. The thought assails me even when I try to avoid it, nags at me in the quiet moments, when everything goes still. It doesn't suggest a path of honesty and openness. What did those things ever get me? It wants me to stop looking through things, stop probing for meaning in life and love and such matters. It wants me to take it all at face value, to believe the lie the best I can, to take that lie to the grave. It wants me to calculate and manipulate and present a version of myself that people can love. Forget the truth. Craft and present a version of myself that tells everyone what they want to hear, gives them something to believe, gives support to this surface lie we've all agreed upon. And if I give them these things, I can take all that I want in return, all that the animal part of me wants. Power, pride, contempt, and lust. All of my primal appetites appeased. Because that's the best you can do, maybe. Taking what you want to make yourself feel good. Becoming the one at the top of the food chain. Maybe that's the only connection that really exists between people. The power we can exert over each other. Maybe. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 48 days after. I look in the mirror and can't believe how much I've physically changed. I'm already all tanned from walking around out there. My body going lean and hard from even the minuscule amount of exercise I do now compared to all of that time in front of the TV and computer before. That's the one thing I'll say about the post-apocalypse. It makes for decent cardio. I look like someone else. Some confident guy with a light beard. Like a man, I guess. An actual adult man who solves problems, makes sweet moves, attacks life with great gusto. Anyway, I've abandoned the idea of getting a car for now. I'd need to find keys since I don't have the internet to teach me how to hotwire or anything like that. It just seems too involved to go door to door looking for car keys and then hoping I can find the matching functioning car in the driveway or garage. The water is all that really matters, so I will focus on that. I will bike out of town, looking for a well in the country somewhere, something with a pump. A hand pump, I guess. That's the one good thing about being in Pittsburgh. There are wooded rural areas not far outside of town, and I'm sure I'll find something. Once the water situation is secure, I will look for a car and a gun. Maybe someday I can find a generator, even if my storage unit has been pillaged. But who knows if there will be any gas left by that time. Those jags in the semi-tanker are apparently going around collecting it all, you know? And it's not like anyone will be refining more oil and shipping it around in its various forms. What's out there now is all there will be for a long, long time. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 49 days after. It wasn't so hot today. It felt great to be outside, to feel the open air rush against me when the wind picked up. I sat and watched the cats eat, and I wondered what will become of them once I'm gone. I'm tempted sometimes to inch my way closer day by day, to make them my pets and take them with me wherever I go next. I don't think it would be difficult. They're pretty comfortable with my presence now. It'd be nice to have companions, though lately I'm more hopeful about finding human ones down the road. In some way, it feels like meddling to do something like that, to pluck these cats from their lives and make them my property. But isn't that what the bigger animals always do to the smaller animals one way or another? Isn't that the way of things in this world? I think it is. Maybe more now than before. Leaving them would have been my course of action before, but maybe I'm changing. It's crazy how life keeps going. All of these people died, and the buildings burned, and the EMP zapped technology back a few decades or something. And the shock burned as bright and hot in me as that flash in the sky. But now it's settling, and I'm making real plans, really thinking about where my life will go next. And wherever that might be, I think I'd like some pet cats. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. 50 days after. I rode the bike for the first time today. The sun seemed angrier than it was yesterday. Livid even. And the sweat drained down my back the whole time. The straps of my backpack wound around the handlebars so it hung there in front of me like a three-toed sloth. I added a sleeve to the bag to serve as a sheath for the machete. It wasn't the sweet scabbard I might have liked, but it made for an easy way to keep my blade with me on the bike. The city faded out around me as I rolled on. The buildings on the side of the road grew smaller and sparser until grass fields and woods took their place. Something about leaving the concrete behind almost seemed overwhelming, though I couldn't say why. The world felt so huge and open without a bunch of vacant structures cluttering the horizon. No more steel, no more brick or cinder block, just organic material all around me, much of it green. It was natural, I suppose, but it made me uneasy too. Kept me on alert. I didn't really have a particular destination in mind when I set out, but at some point early in the ride, the notion of heading by the government camp occurred to me. I remembered the radio message saying that it was off of Interstate 376, exit 58, I think. Christ, that would be weird, wouldn't it? To see the people at the camp. I didn't think I'd get too close, at least not today. It'd be too much to be around them. But I'd get a look from a distance, see if anyone was still out there, and if so, see what they were up to. I couldn't stop picturing what the camp might look like as I rode that way. I pictured cabins, log cabins, I guess, but the slicker, less rustic-looking kind that are built from a modular kit. Several rows of cabins with smoke coiling out of every chimney. I pictured laundry hung from a clothesline, sheets and towels and jeans flapping in the breeze. I pictured people sitting around a bonfire out front, a circle of grapefruit-sized rocks surrounding the fire pit. Kids poking sticks into the flames, prodding at the coals. Men splitting wood in the distance, army and civilian alike taking turns. The axe falling, the pieces of wood tumbling away from the block. Wind whipped through the cornfield around me in a way that sounded like sizzling, and that made me picture a cast-iron skillet on the fire, bacon shaking around inside of it. 2 eggs next to that, the yolks big and fat and yellow, that only organic eggs possess. And then I thought about how silly all of this was. How I was picturing something like a summer camp, some place that might serve bug juice, when the reality was probably pretty hellish. Cramped, contentious, limited rations to go around, the smell of all those people shitting in what I'd imagine to be close proximity to their living quarters. Not like they'd have a sewer system out there to take any of it away. Still, after all of that tang, the bug juice sounded pretty good. I doubt they'd have it, but you never know. Clouds drifted in front of the sun, and the day went gray around me. That got me looking at the sky, thinking about how empty it felt without buildings blocking so much of it from my view, thinking about how small I would look from up in those clouds, pedaling this bike that would have cost more than a beater car had I paid for it rather than borrow it from some dead guy. Thinking about why I was doing this, why I was bothering to do any of this, churning my legs, puffing my lungs, playing that endless drum beat with my heart. But no, I couldn't think those things. Not anymore. If I wanted to transform, I couldn't think those things. And then my eyes snapped away from the clouds, and there it was, the camp. Army green canvas tents covered a wide swath of land, row after row of them. The big sort of boxy ones that probably contained a few cots each. And then I saw all of the cars parked in the grass beyond the tents, the sunlight glinting off of the windshields. So many cars and military vehicles and a few buses as well. It looked like the parking lot outside of a mall or some big sporting event. Looking beyond that, I found the long row of blue porta-potties beyond the vehicles. Letting my eyes fall back to the long view, I realized that the whole area was framed in by a fence with barbed wire along the top. A big gate stood partially open by the cars, and a handful of watchtowers rose up along the fence line. I hadn't realized it at first, but I'd stopped. I stood and watched. I stood, in fact, on tiptoes to keep the bike bar between my legs from pulverizing my testicles. It merely propped them up a bit instead. A lump raised in my throat, like my body had remembered before my mind how close I was to people, maybe even some from my building. Maybe even some I kind of knew. The idea that you were there flashed in my head, unrealistic as it might have seemed before I got here. There were buses, right? Maybe that's why your car was still in the lot. Maybe you rode the bus here. Maybe you were eating a Snickers right now that some soldier slid you on the sly because he thought you were cute. Maybe. My eyes danced over the images, the new images, flicking from the tents to the cars to the porta-potties and back again, mixing up the order at random. I looked on it for a long time before I realized that something was wrong. Though the evidence suggested that thousands, perhaps even tens of thousands of people might be here, nothing was moving. Nothing at all. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 50 days after. I don't remember choosing to set my bike down and walk up to the camp, to the motionless cluster of cars and tents. In my memory, it's more like I floated toward the scene, like a tractor beam pulled me that way. I drifted off of the asphalt and onto the grass, my eyes still dancing over the scene before me, but looking for any signs of life now rather than soaking in the images as novelties. But nothing obliged my search for life. No movements. No sounds. I imagined what it should have looked like. People swarming near the tents, lines of them stretching away from the outhouses, more of them huddled over the picnic tables to eat. I heard all of their throats rise as one to chirp out a single indecipherable sound. Something brushed the leg of my pants then, and I realized that I gripped the machete in my hand, though I had no memory of pulling it free from the sleeve on my backpack. I looked upon it a moment, watched it bob along with my footsteps. I asked myself why I would bring that. Why would that occur to me on an automatic, almost subconscious level? Was I scared? I guessed I was. It made sense, of course, once I thought about it, but things seemed to be happening without me thinking just then. My thoughts were always a couple of steps behind. I crested the last small hill between myself and the tents and began the final descent. As soon as I passed that point, my perspective changed and I saw them. The bodies. The bodies sprawling everywhere. In front of the tents, among the cars. The vultures and buzzards hunching over the dead kicked up into flight when they saw me, curling into the air with minimal wing flapping so they looked more like planes taking off. All of them falling into their circles in the sky right away. A hitch jerked my footsteps under me, my legs almost stopping right there, but the tractor beam's pull didn't let up. I pressed on, moving slowly, listening, hearing only my shoes swishing through the grass for now. With some of them, the ones lying flat on their backs or in the fetal position, I could almost believe they were sleeping. They had a peaceful look about them. The ones that piled atop each other, however, looked limp in a way that only corpses can. Others still lay twisted, limbs and necks contorted into unnatural positions and angles. As I moved closer, the buzzing faded in, the sound lurching and swelling with no discernible meter or rhythm. Flies flitted from body to body like this was a buffet, their wings beating out waves of fizzy sound. But this didn't make sense, did it? How could they die all at once? How could the bodies litter the ground this way? Shouldn't someone have been quarantining the sick and clearing the dead? The few hundred or so people I was looking at couldn't all just stumble out here and keel over, could they? The whole scene didn't look organic somehow. It looked like they all drank poison Kool-Aid together and died within minutes of each other. And then I got close enough to see the wounds. Chests split open red, heads caved in, limbs sheared off into ragged flaps of meat. They were shot, and the severity of the wounds suggested maybe a mounted gun of some type. The trucks flashed into my head, the tanker and the pickup. Could whoever was organizing that gasoline hoarding movement have been part of this? The men had assault rifles. Maybe they had something more powerful too. But then it seemed so brazen to roll up on a military camp and open fire. Probably too ballsy for anyone to actually do, right? I took a left along the fence, walking toward the open gate. Nearing the cars, I saw that many of them were burned, tires blown out, the rubber melted. Glossy paint jobs blackened to a matte finish. The grass around them looked fried to a crispy brown, flecked with black spots along the perimeter of each vehicle. My feet ground rocks into the sandy driveway now. I turned sideways to squeeze through the opening between the gate and the fence, my head trying to arrange these pieces of information in some way that might make sense. Burned cars, bodies broken by large caliber bullets, a government camp gone totally lifeless and still. Maybe the cars were the distraction. They doused them with an accelerant and torched them to get people panicked and out of their tents. Then they opened fire. That would make sense. I could see it in my head, the blaze of the fire in the dead of the night, the flailing and the yelling and the rapid fire of guns ripping through the blackness, that flash of flame from the muzzles as the bullets cut everyone down. But was it those gasoline raiders? Or did the military do this themselves? My eyes flickered over the bodies again. No soldiers. Shouldn't there be some soldiers among the dead? I closed on the corpses, and my eyes soaked in these images like they did all new images lately, taking in these things no one should see and recording them to play over and over again in my dreams. The first women and children I'd seen in some time, their faces blown to bits, their teeth sprinkled in the grass like sesame seeds on a salad. Maggots squirmed where pectoral muscles used to be. Film glazed over eyes like opaque contact lenses the color of slugs. In my memory, it seems like I didn't choose to look at any of this. My eyes pointed themselves at things. My feet shuffled me into the heart of it all, and nausea flexed in the center of my torso like a ball of cramping muscle. I didn't vomit, though I don't know how I avoided it. The profanity was not the death itself, nor was it the lives turned to dead bags of rotting meat around me. The profanity was that someone chose this. In a world where life had been made as scarce as it ever was, someone defiled it anyway, en masse. And why should I be surprised? I've seen what people do to each other so many times, what they've always done to each other. Why would I expect anything else? Even breathing through my mouth, I could smell it. The stink. The stink was like a wave in the air. It stung my eyes. I almost thought I could feel it on my skin, some astringent chemical sting. I gazed into the shaded interior of the tent straight ahead, a little light creeping through the places where bullet holes perforated the canvas. More dead lay within, flopped over cots at haphazard angles, blood congealed in pools below them. I kept walking, moving deeper into the rows of tents. I don't know why, but I heard something rustle ahead of me. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 50 days after. The soldier walked out of the gloom of the tent ahead of me, seeming to materialize in the air 5 feet from where I stood, his assault rifle at his side. He had a dim look about him, a mouth that looked at ease when opened for breathing. He said, "What are you—" I imagine he was going to say doing here, but his words cut off abruptly when my machete split his forehead at an angle from his hairline to his brow, the blade half buried in the top of his face. The wet crunch of cleaved bone mixed with a high-pitched metallic vibration that cut off almost immediately like a muted cymbal. I didn't feel the machete rising up over my head, or really even feel that swift downward stroke of its swing, but I felt it striking the skull. His neck buckled, chin tucking toward his chest, and then I felt the force in my arms and hips unload like a home run swing, sending the ball 650 feet into the upper deck. There was almost a recoil as the follow-through got cut off, a shocking vibration in my hands as all of that momentum bashed into a man's brain and stopped like a head-on collision. Again, I don't recall choosing this action. My arms just did it. He dropped to his knees and his eyelids fluttered for what seemed like a long time before he toppled over, his lips whispering out little stuttering consonant sounds, lispy S and sh sounds mostly. My eyes drifted to the patch sewn on the chest as he blinked. It said Bennett. The blood crept out from around the blade, slow red tears draining down from the wound. Not as much blood as I would have thought, not like that politician shooting himself and turning on the faucet. I cupped my hand under his arms and pulled his body into the shade of the tent. That machete was lodged in there pretty good, so I worked the blade back and forth, trying to get it free from the skull's grip. Endorphins flooded my brain, but no particular thoughts occurred to me. No righteous feelings of having vanquished one of the mass murderers of this camp. I couldn't say for sure if this guy was responsible, of course. He was a threat, so I eliminated him. I didn't let the rush of animal delight over handling the situation diminish my focus, though. I suspected he wasn't alone. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 50 days after. The blade squeaked against the bone before I could get it free from the skull. A scraping moan like something I'd only ever heard at the dentist's office when the hygienist got a little feisty in taking those hooks to my teeth. A little shrill. I wiped the blood off, smearing the machete on the sleeve of the soldier's shirt, one side and then the other like a butter knife on the edge of a piece of toast. Then I hooked my hands under his armpits again and pulled him deeper into the tent. Nestling the limp body among the cots, I flopped a couple of the other corpses on top of him on the diagonal, covering him as best I could in the limbs of the elderly people. I didn't really know what to do after that, so I crouched at the edge of the tent and waited. I listened for a time, hearing nothing, my thoughts beginning to stir. I wondered, if the soldiers had really done this, and if the orders had come from the top, what might the reason have been? Not enough supplies for all of the camps, so some have to go? Too many sick in a particular camp means they pull the plug? It seemed like such a leap to go straight for murdering people, but the only motivations I could come up with were of the cold, calculated variety. Well, two could play at that game. This guy's buddies would come around looking for him before long, and I'd be waiting on them. My arm flexed and I felt the heft of the machete in my hand again, my muscles wanting to remember that unwinding and recoil, wanting to feel it again. Around this time, the notion that I'd killed someone, a flesh and blood human being, finally started down the long road towards sinking in. I wasn't upset. Even with the ambiguity regarding this individual's involvement in whatever massacre went down here, I wasn't upset. I couldn't get over that level of force I'd felt, the torque I had created, the power I expelled. It felt nothing like I'd felt hiding in that gas station, quivering under the counter. I felt like a beast. I felt in control. I shifted my weight from foot to foot and pushed up onto the balls of my feet to stretch my calves. In the process, I kicked the M4 carbine at my feet. Okay, yeah, fuck the machete. I placed the blade down. I tried to remember to grab it on the way out, maybe. The assault rifle seemed so light. It almost seemed like a toy at first. I turned it over a few times, tucked the stock against that place where the deltoid and pectoral meet, pinched one eye closed and gazed down the barrel. This was no toy. It felt right. I didn't flinch when I heard the snare roll-like burst of automatic gunfire somewhere off to my right. I moved out. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 50 days after. I squat-walked forward, passing through the opening in the tent, moving from the shade into the sunlight. The gunfire had come and gone in one quick burst, but my ears still felt it somehow. An inward suction feeling like my inner ears had the wind knocked out of them, or maybe like my eardrums were attempting to retract further into my head to get away, wishing only to be swallowed up by my brain. I weaved my way there between the tents and used them for cover as I advanced, peeking around every corner, inching toward the source of the sound. My feet tousled the tops of the blades of grass and smashed oblong sections of green down with every step, bodies still sprawled to my left and right, though they seemed to be getting sparser as I moved deeper into the rows of tents. I held the gun in front of me, watching it bob along at the bottom of my field of vision, feeling almost like I was playing out a tense video game moment in real life. No intricate strategies occurred to me here. No thoughts of flanking or outmaneuvering anyone. No plans to create a distraction to try to isolate my enemies and take them out one by one. No words at all passed through my skull. Just feelings and heat and a throb of electricity. Wet, hot, red feelings that pulsed in my brain and hammered in my chest and shuffled my feet forward and made my finger tremble against the trigger. An uncontrollable urge that demanded satisfaction. About 7 tents deep, I rounded a corner and found myself facing the backs of 2 soldiers. Their rifles stood ready before them, aimed at a fidgeting body on the ground. I watched the helpless figure squirm at their feet, a bald man with a sickly yellow complexion. He made no attempt to beg for his life, didn't even look the soldiers in the eyes. I couldn't help but wonder if I'd looked like that on the gas station floor, and as they dragged me out onto the glass-covered asphalt. Did I writhe around like that? And I thought about how much I dreaded this. Even before everyone died and the world became harsh and violent right out in the open, I dreaded confrontation. I'd worried about it. I feared that when it finally came along, I'd freeze. I'd flinch. I'd be too scared to move. But it was here, and I knew no fear. I felt the power in my arms, felt a gun in my hands, and I had control. I found myself stimulated by this, found pleasure in this aggression welling up inside, that sadistic glee that makes you smile right before you jump out and scare someone. I raised the carbine, lined up the sight with the back of the flat-topped head, aiming directly for that knobby spot where the brain pan ends and the skull slopes into the neck. I took a breath, blinked a few times. I could feel every individual drop of sweat on my skin just then, all of them oozing at different speeds, meandering downward on different angles. My fingers squeezed and the gun popped out a percussive sound, the stock digging into my shoulder, and the brains blasted out of the front of the shattered head. I wheeled to the right, lined up the second flat-topped skull, rinsed and repeated just as the soldier turned toward me, and his head too came apart, this time the bullet entering near his temple and the gloop flying out of the back. A feeling came over me then like someone poured a shrieking kettle of water in with my brain. The warmth roiled all through me like when you wake up sick and confused, and my hands and arms shook from the adrenaline, stimulation to the point that my thoughts smeared together. My jaw clenched as tight as it could, flexing in rapid-fire bursts. The only word I can think of to describe this moment is fun. Really fun. Like riding the biggest, fastest, most satisfying roller coaster and orgasming the whole time. It was the strangest, sickest feeling, but I couldn't wipe the smile off of my face. Couldn't stop the tingle that filled my chest with every breath. I don't remember the bodies falling. Don't remember the knees buckling and the dead weight slumping to the ground. I just remember the two of them in a final state of recline a few feet apart from each other, their heads torn to pieces, one faceless, one not. And I looked upon them for a long while, and these words came to me from nowhere. And all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put their brains back together again. The toppled figure that lay before the army men showed no real reaction to either my gunshots or the gory scene in front of him. I'd almost forgotten him, almost felt alone for a second there. He crawled toward the corpses, his movements slow and strangely inarticulate, and I knew right away he wasn't normal, wasn't quite human. I watched his arms drag him across the grass, watched him mount the faceless corpse, watched his eyes remain blank while he went to chewing the loose flaps of flesh around the edge of the exit wound, rivulets of blood squishing out of the corners of his mouth. I sat and stared as he went at it for a while, gnawing and chawing and slurping, before I put a bullet in his head too. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 53 days after. I think I hallucinated some people today, so that was new. I rode my bike south, checking out some of the stores out that way. First of all, I should mention that it smells like piss over there. Like everywhere. Just a real pissy smell hanging in the air. Human urine. Not the best. So I had my t-shirt up over my mouth and nose, and I checked out some of the shops in one of the plazas over there. The hardware and sporting goods stores had been cleared of anything useful. I thought about taking a volleyball to talk to, but I figured screw it. It gets weird to feel so alone as you do this stuff, so I think I was singing as I walked into this Chuck E. Cheese. I guess I sing when I'm out there now. I didn't really realize this until I heard a noise and then I saw these girls in the back of the restaurant. I got kind of embarrassed. They were young, like a teenager and a little girl. I made eye contact with the older one as she slipped through a door. It really caught me off guard, so I froze for a second and then I worked my way over there. The door was locked, and by the time I found the key and got in there, nothing. No one there. Of course. I bet I will sing less when I start hearing voices. So I'm looking forward to that. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, 57 days after. So I think I'm all done. Writing, that is. How long could this really go on anyway? It was never going to work between us. I see that now. Truth is, and I'm not trying to be mean here, you just aren't my type. I ain't into dead chicks. And I'm leaving here anyway. I've been out riding, scouting, all day the past few days. And I found places with functioning hand pumps on the wells out in the damn boonies. A house up on a hill that I can easily defend. I almost can't believe it's unoccupied, though I suppose it won't be for long. Now when I sleep, I dream of those two corpses, one faceless and the other not. I see their heads come apart over and over. But it doesn't bother me. It doesn't upset me. It's not like the chocolate snot. It's destruction without meaning. Just a thing I saw. A thing I did. A thing I will do again. A thing I want. A thing I became. That's the truth right there. The beast is come. I am the end. And you should know that when I look in the mirror, I like this thing I am. Whatever it is, Whatever it means, I like it. I feel like a beaten-up match that finally got scraped against the sidewalk hard enough to ignite, and now I'm going to burn brighter and hotter than all you motherfuckers combined, dead or alive as you may be. I will burn anyone who gets close. So I will try to squeeze this behemoth of a letter into an envelope or two and slide it under your door, and then I will be gone. It may be pointless, I realize, maybe an empty gesture to deliver this piece of writing. Ours may be a relationship that only ever existed in my head. But maybe they're all pointless. Maybe they all just exist in people's heads. I don't know. I started this letter in a lonely state, surrounded by people, literally in a building crawling with them, a city full of them, but unsure how to connect with them, how to really know any of them. And I end this letter in a lonely state, a different kind of lonely with no one around for miles, apart from the dead bodies, I guess. But it's okay. Sometimes I think the kind of connection I was looking for was never real anyway, wasn't possible. It was just a fantasy, a childish way of looking at the world, of looking at people. I saw individual humans, personalities distinct from each other like snowflakes, and I imagined some way for two of them to intertwine, for each self to worm its way out of its skull and become one with another. But maybe a kiss isn't more than it seems on the most literal level, the most animal level, just like what I saw in those soap operas. Maybe it's just two apes pressing their mouth holes together after all, serving those impulses no different from all of the other apes, little different from all of the other beasts. Maybe that's all we are, for real. What does any of it matter now? I'll go through the motions one last time. I will slide this note under that door, and I will stand in the hallway for a beat, and then I will move on, free from all I've ever been, all I've ever desired, all I've ever believed. I will walk out among the other apes and know the beast I am. I will walk into a future full of murder and guts and fun. Never see you on the other side of the door. Decker.
This has been The Scattered and the Dead, Book 0.5, written by Tim McBain and L.T. Vargus, narrated by Tim McBain. Copyright 2016, Tim McBain and L.T. Vargus.
Audible hopes you have enjoyed this program.